Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of January. Today, 4 bodies, including a man and 2 young girls from the same family, are discovered in a property near Norwich.
The Home Office grants 16,000 asylum seekers the right to work in care, construction and farming, whilst also offering them free accommodation. That's happened over the last year.
Prince Harry faces a £750,000 legal bill after withdrawing his libel case against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday.
The government backs proposals to make cat and dog thefts a criminal offence in England and Northern Ireland.
And could you be without your mobile for the day? Well, if you're up for the challenge, today is the day. It's no phones at home. Could you manage it?
Our children now, if they're on a trajectory to live till the age of 90, they will spend 25 years of their life looking at a screen.
Aidan's here with your sport.
Yes, good morning. He is no flash in the pan. Teenage darts sensation Luke Littler followed up his run to the World Championship final earlier this month by winning the Bahrain Masters final. And in football, guess who's back? Ivan Toney returns from an 8-month betting ban.
Aidan, thank you. Annie Shuttleworth's got you weather today.
Good morning. Storm Isha's on the way for Sunday, but what's in store for the weather today? Well, you can find all the details with me a little bit later on.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Could you do without your mobile phone for a day?
No.
There you go.
No.
Interesting. I mean, I know that the reason for no phones at home day is really about children being spending too much time in front of their
They learn
screens.
from their parents.
Well, exactly. I mean, I don't think I could do without my phone for a day.
No, but I don't think you should have to. I think it's a bit of a pointless exercise, really.
Well, we'll be discussing it later. You can put
We
that to
will.
our expert.
Well, yes, we're talking to the woman who organises
Yes,
it.
that's right. But could you do without your phone for the day? Have you ever had to? I mean, I must say, on the occasions where I suddenly think, I can't find my phone, and you spend ages looking for it because you think, well, I don't think I could get on with the day without my
But
phone.
it depends what you're doing on it. The idea is, I suppose, kids are constantly watching YouTube and TikTok or whatever it is.
TikTok.
And all that sort of stuff. Whereas I use it as a medical device. So all the messages, all the diary stuff is on there. So I use it for that.
Yes, exactly.
It's a helpful tool for me.
But come the digital Armageddon, you know, what will you do? You know how to write.
Got a pen.
Yes. Will there be a Royal Mail anymore? I don't know.
No,
Anyway. And the other thing I want to talk about throughout the programme today, and I know that's something that you probably feel very strongly about. I was watching, quite by accident, I was watching the Parliamentary channel yesterday afternoon.
Did you watch that accidentally?
I was just flicking through and I suddenly saw that they were debating the bill to make dog and cat theft, in other words, pet theft, a criminal offence, because it isn't at the moment. And it was a brilliant debate, and so many MPs who you would never really think were very moved to that subject, they got up and they spoke really movingly about how important pets are to us.
It's common sense.
Particularly dogs, but obviously cats and other things as well.
God, yeah.
And that there is a rising tide of theft in this area. And it was a brilliant debate. It was well worth listening to. So I just wondered if you've had any experience of your cat or dog being stolen, because the trouble is they have value, don't they? And we just sort of let them out in the front yard or something. And
Get them chipped and tattooed.
yeah, yes. Is that a?
Dog tattooing is the thing.
Would that actually prevent somebody?
I think
pinching
so.
it,
As long as that with Rex, he has got his tag says, "I am chipped and tattooed."
Ah, I see. So
if anyone did nick him, they're going to go, well,
put them off.
You know, it's you tattoo them on their ear.
Whereas my little dog just goes, and she'd go with anyone.
Yeah. Rex would probably eat anyone.
Well, that's true, yeah. Anyway, do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com if you've got a story pertaining to that. If you've ever lost a dog or had a dog or cat stolen or anything like that, we'd love to hear your story.
Now, we are starting with horrific news from yesterday because police have announced 4 people, or 3 people, I should say, from the same family have been found dead at a property near Norwich, and an additional person was also found dead at the scene after officers forced their way into a house.
Yeah, according to the reports, the bodies of a 45-year-old man, a 36-year-old woman and 2 girls were discovered inside, all with injuries.
Well, Norfolk and Suffolk police forces have cordoned off the area whilst forensic tests are being carried out.
And joining us now is former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, we're all sort of thinking, what on earth could have happened? And obviously, we don't know at the moment. So what would police be doing? Where do they start? How do they find out?
Well, there's several aspects that the forensic experts were there. There'll be the usual wet forensics, so they can look at whatever weapons were used. Is there any blood spattering? Does that tell us anything? Any finger marks? DNA testing, just to see. But also, what's changed in the last decade is the availability of digital evidence. So lots of people have CCTV in their home. People have Ring doorbells, so you can see if somebody's arrived at the property, what demeanour were they in. And then, of course, people have phones. They have iWatches. And that gives a real... you don't have to estimate the time of death anymore. That tells you on this second somebody died. People might have recorded things. In addition to all that, of course, on our phones and on our computers, you know, somebody might have been sending emails, text messages. They might have been searching for different things. So all this digital evidence really adds up with the wet forensic side to give a really clearer picture. In fact, sometimes you can actually see what's happened because somebody's recorded it in their house. And you've got things like Alexa recording things. So there's all those aspects that would come together. So, and this tragedy, of course, people will be demanding answers. As I understand it from what's reported in the press right now, it's a father, his 2 young school-aged daughters, and his wife's sister. They're the 4 people who reported to be in the house.
Right. I mean, it's interesting that police are already saying they think this is an isolated incident, which suggests they have a train of thought that they're following, does it?
I think so, yes. And I have to say that this is Norfolk Police again. And if you remember with the Gaynor Lord who went missing in Norwich, with the tragedy there. But I do think that whatever the Norfolk Police are doing, they're very good at handling the media and giving out messages. Not because what they found, of course, with the Nicola Bulley case is that if you leave a void of information, then people will fill it. So straight away yesterday, there was a knife found. It's all over social media, and they cut that off at the pass. That's nothing to do with this investigation. And I think some serious lessons have been learned since the Nicola Bulley thing, and because the police are handling that well. And I just think the Norfolk Police come across as very professional at the moment, I have to say.
You were telling me just a few minutes ago, before we actually came on air, that there was a case, you remember, and I sort of vaguely remember it, where there had been a murder, but police were able to disprove the evidence being given by, I think, the man who was ultimately found guilty.
Yes, so there's...
Because, again, I think the victim had been wearing a watch which showed her time of death.
Yeah, the viewers may recall it was a Greek helicopter pilot who was married to a British woman, and he claimed that the Albanian robbers had broken into house, tied him up so he couldn't move around, killed his wife, killed the dog. And, of course, what they could show from his mobile phone, the amount of steps he was taking at the time that he said he was incapacitated, and it could also show that his wife was actually asleep. There was no movement shown until somebody said, and it showed that it took her 5 minutes to die. But that's how important this digital age is now to investigations.
How in terms of that, though, what I find interesting is because we talk a lot about when digital stuff goes wrong. I mean, only look at Horizon and all the rest of it. In terms of a court of law, is that satisfactory to be able to say, well, the watch says this? Is that viewed as gospel, if you like? Well,
the watch will be examined by digital experts who will be able to say, was there any faults with it? You know, of course, with CCTV, the easiest thing we all see with CCTV is it says on the screen it's 10 o'clock when really the clocks have gone back and it's 9 o'clock. So that's a very simple thing that, you know, when you take that evidence, you make the note that it's an hour away. Because if you put several bits of CCTV together, it can be odd because one's showing different times. So you've got to show the real time. So the experts will check all that and they'll be able to show, but it also gives pointers. You know, it doesn't mean that you take that evidence in isolation. You could then use it with all the other things to show a complete picture.
Okay.
It is amazing. Yeah, go on. No, you do it.
I was just going to say we're out of time.
Oh.
We're being yelled at, Anne.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, but the good news is you're back a little bit later on, Mike, aren't you?
Well,
so we'll see you a little bit
Thank
later.
you.
Sorry, Anne, yes.
No,
you're getting
that's
too
all right.
engrossed.
I was, absolutely.
But it's,
yeah.
it's fascinating, all this sort of... But horrific. I mean, we've got to... It's fascinating.
But it's
to talk
interesting,
about
isn't it, that
forensics
we are
is.
carrying
We're talking
around...
about a family who've died.
We're carrying around little recorders of our life without really realising it. Anyway, we've got a statement, I think. Detective Chief Inspector Chris Burgess, who is leading the investigation, has released this statement. He says, I understand that news of this incident will be shocking to the local community, and as soon as we can, we will release more information.
Yeah, they go on to say our investigation is in the very early stages, and this is clearly a very distressing and tragic incident, which, of course, certainly is.
Yeah.
Now, nearly 16,000 Channel migrants living rent-free in Britain have been given the right to work across the country. That's according to data obtained under Freedom of Information laws.
Yes, apparently they're paid 80% of the going rate in sectors that are facing staff shortages, like care, construction and agriculture.
They do lose their £49 a week subsistence allowance, and they have to contribute towards accommodation costs.
Well, what do you think of that? Let's speak to former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, who joins us now.
Morning.
This is quite, this is rather interesting, isn't it? It's something that I don't think most of us knew or even suspected.
It is, and it's an interesting read to me because there are two sides to this story. There'll be one group of people who think this is completely outrageous because that just encourages a pull factor of people to make that terrible
Which is an argument which has been made a lot.
It is. I mean, then the other side of the coin where people say, well, hold on, if you've got people that have made that journey, if you're being put up in a hotel at the expense of the taxpayer, there are so many jobs that need to be filled, particularly in care, in agriculture, in those particular sectors. You know, you should put these people to work, would be what some people suggest. So there will be two arguments to this. I think the detail still needs to come out, but my understanding is that a number of these people that are working, it's about 15,000, 16,000 people, I think, as you rightly said, were part of a backlog of the system who had been waiting over a year for their case to be determined. So they'd entered the country, they'd been held for a year in a hotel accommodation at the expense of the taxpayer. Their case had been not concluded, and therefore a scheme was available for them to work. But now I think, as the government will argue, that it has cleared a lot of that backlog since 2022 into 2023, you'll see less of those people, I would assume, being able to apply for that scheme.
What we don't know is details of the money. 80% of the going rate is apparently what they're getting. They're not getting the subsistence allowance. We don't know how much they're having to pay towards the accommodation
Nor
costs.
what the accommodation is.
No, but it could be a point with this where they're actually not walking away with a bit of pocket money, if you like, at the end of a working week, rather than raking in the money, which in some respects makes sense.
It does, and whatever you think about the scheme, because of that transaction, because of the money that would be going as part of the scheme from the Home Office or from the Treasury to those individuals that are working, at least they're the people who are in contact with the system,
Yes,
as opposed to people we know where they are. They're doing a good job, or they're doing a job, but they haven't been lost. They haven't been sort of out of contact with the system since coming into the country. So they are people who are clearly doing something useful, if that's how people would view it. But again, there'll always be the other side of the coin where people think it's too much of a pull factor. In fact, it would encourage more people to come into the UK illegally rather than apply through other means.
But at least those who are doing it are proving the point that they do want to come here and work and contribute. So in a way, that sort of is a gold star for them, isn't it? What is worse is the figure that we learned yesterday about so many migrants just being in Britain, illegal migrants being in Britain, and then just disappearing.
6,000, I think it was.
6,000.
And I think that will be something that raises a lot of eyebrows, actually, the fact that people do come into this country, they are then sort of held and their cases processed, and then they're lost. And that is, I think that will be most worrying to local communities. But you're right, I mean, there are people who we have to understand do come into the country, and it won't just be through the small boats crossings, but there'll be people that are seeking asylum that come into this country who have a right, to come into this country, that do have a right to claim asylum because they're fleeing some sort of war or conflict. It is those people, I think, who come into the country who are economic migrants, where you see on the boats, it's not necessarily young families or it is economic migrants, particularly young men, a lot of them from Albania, who have been returned. There's a 90% returns rate now from those coming in from from Albania. So I think there is a balance to be struck between people that do want to come into the country, who have a right to come into the country, who want to work, as you rightly said, Anne, and who are doing something that is fulfilling, and in sectors where it is under, we have an underemployment in this country. You know, we do have an issue in our care sector, we do have an issue in agricultural, in our agricultural sector. So the fact that those people are doing jobs in those particular industries, I think could be a good thing, versus those that try to chance their arm and come in illegally and should be deported once Rwanda gets up and running.
I was going to say, I wonder how I've done it again, haven't
You have done it again. You're not listening. You're not listening. Turn your earpiece on. Charlie, I know we're going to see you a little bit later on.
Sure.
So thank you very much indeed. If you've got a view on that, and I bet you do, gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK,
Yeah, go on.
it's 6:15.
On the nose.
Yes, here are some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. The Japanese Space Agency has made contact with its spacecraft after it successfully landed on the moon. And now that makes Japan the 5th country in the world to be able to do so. The ship, called Moon Sniper, landed within 100 metres of the target location, but problems with its solar power systems could see it live for only a few hours.
The Met Office says injuries and danger to life are likely as Storm Aisha brings strong winds and disruption to parts of the country this weekend, as if we hadn't had enough. The strongest winds expected tomorrow night and Monday morning, with 2 amber warnings. Most of the damage will affect coastal areas. It could be large waves and beach debris.
Tata Steel has confirmed up to 2,800 jobs will be affected by its plan to close the furnaces at its Port Talbot site. The cuts will be made over the next 18 months as the company transitions to a greener way of working. However, the Unite union says it's ready to use everything in its armoury to protect staff and defend their industry.
Now, hours after withdrawing his High Court libel claim against the Mail on Sunday, Prince Harry has arrived at an awards ceremony in Los Angeles.
The Duke of Sussex says he wants to focus now on the safety of his family and his legal action against the Home Office.
He was suing the newspaper over an article about his publicly funded security arrangements when visiting the UK.
And apparently he'll now have to pay the Mail on Sunday's legal costs as well as his own. And that could come to something like £750,000.
Oh, well, it's not as if he hasn't got it. Let's talk to royal correspondent and writer Michael Cole. Morning, Michael. It's an awful situation, is it, when most of us see this headline and think, oh, well, thank heaven, serves him right, which I hate, but it is how most of us feel.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Anne. Yes, a bad day yesterday for the Sussexes in their California Camelot. The Prince of Litigation throwing in the towel in this libel case, and a very expensive decision as well at the very last minute. As you've just said, his costs are going to be enormous, £250,000, £250,000, the newspaper's costs, and then another £500,000 of costs that he has accrued in bringing this case and then dropping it peremptorily as it was about to go to the next stage. The libel courts, of course, are open to us all, but like the Ritz Hotel, there is open to us all, but they're both very expensive. And in libel cases, there is no legal aid. You pay your own tab. This is a great deal of money, particularly as you don't seem to be doing much in the way of work around the place, apart from litigating in the British courts, because although this case has been dropped, the Prince still has cases outstanding, as you've said, against the Home Office and against the publishers of the Sun newspaper and of the Daily Mail associated newspapers. So it goes on, but this one has been ticked off expensively. And after his success against the Mirror Group a few months ago, this is going to be definitely a blow to the man we see there coming out of the courts. What was interesting about it is that the Mail put forward the defence that what they'd written was an honest opinion. And I think it's important to say that the judge, and I'm going to read what he said, this defence of honest opinion is fundamental to the protection of freedom of expression under English law. And I think that will be music to many people's ears.
I can't help but feel sorry for him. I mean, I'm critical of him as well, I think, as most of us are. But you feel sorry for him because he's got so many court cases going on at the moment. There's such hostility going on in his life. It must be taking a toll on him, mustn't it?
And I've seen him from the time he was a little boy, the day he went to nursery school for the first time with his mother, and coming out with his finger puppet to take home to show his mother afterwards. I've seen him on his first holidays abroad with his family, and of course we've seen him grow up. And let us remember the happy prince. Let us remember the prince we admired for doing 2 tours of arduous duty in Afghanistan. He was extraordinarily popular, and then it all went sideways, and they scooted off, first of all, to Canada and then to California, which may have been Meghan Markle's original destination anyway. So it is, as you say, very sad to see it brought to this particular stage. He has said in recent days that he misses Britain, that he misses his friends, he misses the sport, he misses the camaraderie, he misses a lot about this country. And in a way, I think we miss him. And of course, with the recent events, both the Princess of Wales in hospital and the King going into hospital, there would have been a very important role for him to pick up some slack here and play his full part in the royal family. And, never say never. The prodigal son is always welcome. Perhaps he should be back here, and perhaps even he thinks that. I can't imagine what was going through his mind when he heard that his sister-in-law, about whom he's been rather unkind, indeed cruel, in his book Spare, which we were talking about a year ago, and indeed in other books, which he appears to have been involved, Omid Scobie's book, and so on. I wonder what he thought about that, because there's a woman who's gone into hospital. It's quite clearly not a trivial thing. It's not a minor matter. I don't think we could exaggerate the seriousness of it all, staying in hospital for two weeks, which doesn't happen these days. Doctors, as soon as you're ambulatory, on your feet, they send you home. So we don't know. It is all the greatest pity, and it doesn't have to happen. But for this litigation, you have to be a litigant. These are cases he has brought, not have been brought upon him.
Absolutely.
Michael, we've got to leave it there. Good to see you this morning.
Right, well, we wonder what's going to happen with the weather, because suddenly overnight we're hearing about Storm Aisha, something like this. Annie Shuttleworth would tell us.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Aisha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east, as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night, much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Aisha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Aisha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
Heck.
Well, we're
It
wondering if
never
there
ends.
are any Ishas watching. Because are you an Isha or an Aisha?
Yes, because I knew an Aisha Cisse.
I know it's spelt the same way
Spelt
as
the
this
same
storm.
way.
And that
And
was
yet
Aisha.
Annie's there saying Isha.
Well, if there's anyone who's
do we
named
know?
Isha and who knows, please get in touch with us. We'll try and get it right. gbviews@gbnews.com.
One thing we do know how to say is Luke Littler.
Yes.
And he continues his stunning rise to the top after winning the Bahrain Masters. Aidan's got all the details on that in a moment.
And could you live without your phone for a day? That's cool. Coming up after this.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:27, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Now, could you be without your mobile phone for the day? And would your children be able to cope with no access to their phones or smart devices?
Well, if you're up for the challenge, today is the time to put it to the test. It is officially no phones at home day, where people across the UK are being encouraged to replace scrolling and posting with alternative activities to spend time together, to talk, think, laugh and play. It's not going to get a big take.
I was just going to say, I can just imagine me sitting my children down saying, now, you can't have your phones today. We're all going to do a jigsaw puzzle instead. Wouldn't go down that well. But our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley, will tell us more.
Smartphones are part of our everyday lives. We use them for work, to stay in touch and to catch up on social media. But Dr. Charlotte Armitage is warning that excessive screen use can negatively impact mental health, especially in children.
Devices are getting in the way of developing these really important interpersonal skills, such as conflict resolution, tolerating difference, relationship building, all of these things that are really important for us to navigate an adult life. So in adult life, we need to be able to manage our relationships in order to hold down a job, to have friends, to have a partner, to have a marriage. If we don't have the skills to manage relationships, then all of these things become challenging. And if we struggle in those areas, it has a really significant impact on our mental health.
To encourage us to spend time away from our devices, Dr. Armitage created No Phones at Home Day, a national event where people are challenged to put their mobiles away and instead spend time together.
Our children now, if they're on a trajectory to live till the age of 90, they will spend 25 years of their life looking at a screen. Every generation is used to having a phone like this now. So we're all kind of face down in these phones, not really aware of how much it's consuming our lives. And I think we would all be a lot calmer and less overwhelmed, less anxious, if we did have more time away from the devices.
The Dylan Pearson family, like many across the UK, rely on their devices, but they're putting them away on No Phones at Home Day.
They are essential and we all need them, and it's, you know, they are a good thing to have. But on the other hand, I think they can be a bit too much, and everything in moderation, really. And I think this day really does highlight that and make us think consciously of not using them as much and spending time.
It's going to be a difficult task for Annabelle, Emily and Harriet, but it's one that they're embracing.
A bit worried, but it'll be fun. I'm going to lose all my streaks and everyone's going to be like missing me, like, where are you, Emily? But I feel like it'll be beneficial for all of us, I feel like.
Well, I think it's good for my sisters so they can play with me. I think it's so we can spend time as a family.
So if you're taking part, whether you decide to play board games or get out of the house, don't let your device distract you. Anna Riley, GB News.
Well, Alan says, morning, Alan, I don't have a smartphone and people sometimes make fun of me for that. But there you go. They cause many problems. I think they should all be melted down and made into something useful like buses. Well, I disagree, Alan, I've got to say.
Well, you would, yeah. Mark says everyone seems to be on their mobile phones these days. We were better off without them.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I think there's... But, I mean, it does... Look, it worries me about the kids being on them so much.
Because they reckon 25 years.
Yeah, but is that...
The average kid will, through their life, will spend 25 years of it on their phone.
Well, no, looking at a screen,
Looking
she
at
said,
screens.
which I wondered if that means, like, laptops and everything else, does it? Work?
Yeah, but lots of people have. I mean, I do. You multi-screen. You have your laptop open. You have your digital thing there. You've got the television there, and you're still on your phone.
No, I don't.
Oh, I multi-screen a lot. It's bad, isn't it?
Is that? Oh,
but why do we humans love it so much?
I don't
Form of
know.
communication.
Well, Pete, you're probably emailing us on your phone rather than a computer.
Well, that's very true.
But anyway, let us get in touch. Let us know what you think. In the meantime, at 6:31, let's remind you of the top stories today. And 4 bodies, including a man and 2 young girls from the same family, have been discovered in a property near Norwich.
The government grants 16,000 asylum seekers the right to work in areas such as care, construction and farming. And that's a Home Office scheme.
And Prince Harry has got a £750,000 legal bill after withdrawing his libel case against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday.
The government backs proposals to make cat and dog thefts a criminal offence in England and Northern Ireland.
Ada McGee's got the sport for us this morning. Morning. We've got to talk about Luke Littler. He's only gone and done it.
He certainly has. I mean, if you look back on breakthrough acts in sport over the last 30, 40 years or whatever, you think, OK, you can sometimes get someone making a dart from, well, pardon the pun, from left field and doing something spectacular like Luke Littler. And then you think, well, can he back it up? Is he going to be Boris Becker in 1985 and follow up with more success? Or is he going to be Emma Raducanu and go missing for 2.5 years? Well, here's your answer. He won the Bahrain Masters yesterday. He did it the hard way. Beat Michael van Gerwen in the final season.
And did a 9-darter.
In the quarter-final, yeah, that was against Gerwyn Price. And he also took on, who was the other player? Nathan Aspinall in the quarter-final, yeah, 9-darter. And then it was Gerwyn Price in the semi-final. So he did it the hard way, £20,000 in his account to add to the £200,000 he won winning the, or getting to the World Championship final. He's playing the Dutch Masters final.
And remind us how old he is?
He's 17 tomorrow.
Is he 17 tomorrow?
17 tomorrow,
wow.
yeah. So
I'm glad he's done it on a win.
Yes, exactly.
Good.
So 220 grand in his account. I mean, he's playing in the Premier League from early February onwards. So and there was a bit of a conjecture around whether he should be in it at all. You know, he hasn't really done enough. But I think getting to the final.
What else he has now?
What else do you have to do?
And do you think he's going to sort of ultimately make the sport more popular again?
Well, how many times?
I mean, we're talking about it.
Yeah, outside. I mean, look, we occasionally have darts on top of the agenda when it's the world title. That's in January, around about Christmas time. I don't recall darts being top of the agenda ever, really. Any place I've worked, and the previous place I worked had the rights to cover it, but we never really had it at the top of the agenda. But today, it was by far and away my top story, and that's with some important Premier League stories going on as well.
I haven't heard him do an interview, actually, myself. Is he a bit of a character as well?
Yes, he is. He comes across a very decent, level-headed fellow, and he's going to need to be, because one of the problems that beset Emma Raducanu from looking from afar was that too many people want a piece of you. And it's a little bit like Paul Gascoigne in 1990.
Yeah.
He said himself, everyone wanted a piece of me. I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't want to let anybody down. He needs good people around him to say, OK, do that appearance, maybe sign that commercial deal, but don't flog yourself to death ahead of what could be a very important tournament next week. And his schedule will fill up. And he deserves his place in the Premier League, in my view. And you know what? Who would back against him winning it right now? I mean, he's just won an important tournament in Bahrain. He's got Holland to come, Premier League in the early February, and he's just been to the final. And he you know, had it not been for that pivotal moment in the final, there, I think he would have gone on to win it.
No, we're going to hear more of him over the years.
Yeah. Let's talk Premier League then, should we? Ivan Toney is going to captain Brentford. He owes a lot to Brentford, actually, doesn't he?
Well, yes, on the face of it, because they've stood by him and during an 8-month ban for betting, lots of breaches. He bet against. You're not allowed to, if you're as a footballer, to be clear, you're not allowed to bet on any football. He bet against his team winning, or bet his team to lose, but he wasn't playing for them at the time. So it was a serious problem. The FA even pushed for a longer sentence because they said, well, from the 8 months that he was banned from May, I think it was, 10 weeks of it was during the summer when there were no games being played. So it didn't seem like a very appropriate punishment. He wasn't allowed to train with the team even, wasn't even allowed to spend time at the training ground until quite recently. And so does he owe Brentford? Footballers sadly don't think like that because it's a short career. And if Arsenal, who are desperate for a player like him right now, come in for him before the end of the month, if the price is right, history shows that Brentford will sell if the money's right and he will go. I think he just needs to stay there, though. It's not a question of owing, it's a question of just getting his feet back under the table, getting back into the football consciousness above and beyond doing interviews. He hasn't shown a great deal of contrition, I have to say. But if he gets 6 months or 5 months under his belt, Brentford are desperate for him. They haven't won since December the 2nd, Dan. They're 3 points above the bottom three. They're desperate for him to get back in the side. They've been pinning their hopes on him a little bit too much, actually. I would argue the other players haven't been doing quite enough. They've been in anticipation of his return. But he needs to get a good few months under his belt, and that will suit everybody. Somebody else will buy him in the summer. If he scores 6 or 7 goals before the end of the season, keeps Brentford up, his transfer fee goes up, Brentford benefit from that as well. So we've not really known a situation like this for quite a while. Rio Ferdinand was banned for 8 months, of course, for missing a drugs test back in 2003.
Wow.
And we had Eric Cantona, if you remember, the attack on the fan, January 1995. He was banned for 9 months. Both of those players from Man United made very successful comebacks. Ivan Toney at 5:30 today against Nottingham Forest as captain. He'll be looking to do that again. He said to his teammates yesterday, "Big Dog's back." So he obviously believes in himself. Who else called himself Big Dog? It was a famous Prime Minister, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Boris. Operation Save Big Dog. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Aidan, thanks very much. See you a little bit later on.
Do stay with us because we'll be finding out why police in Devon had an extremely unusual call-out to a forest. That's next in our paper review.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:39. Let's have a look at some of the newspapers for you this morning. We'll start with The Times. It has concerns from European and American generals over Britain's dwindling army size.
The Daily Mail reports on the UK being gripped by a measles crisis.
The Mirror has Tata Steel's decision to cut nearly 3,000 jobs.
And The Guardian leads with the potential destruction of key environmental and health protections following Brexit.
The Express has Esther Ranson's call for a parliamentary debate on assisted dying.
And joining us now to go through some of those headlines and all of the stories inside as well, Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Lovely to see you both.
Morning.
Right, let's start with the story, because we've been talking about it already, and I must say our viewers, thank you very much for getting in touch, have really got...
Not happy.
No, not happy about this at all. Fraser, it's the Channel migrants being given the right to work.
Yeah, so there's a Home Office scheme that's been operating on the quiet. I think that is part of the problem, that allows essentially asylum seekers, I think after a year, to start working in certain jobs. Now, I think actually there isn't anything that wrong in principle with asylum seekers working. In many ways, it's preferable to them not doing very much, sort of languishing on these waiting lists, only being given a sort of £50 stipend a week. But the way the scheme is set up, I think, seems really problematic. The fact that they are being allowed to work for 80% of the going rate, undercutting wages, which I think is a big gripe that people have about immigration, understandably. And the other thing is that they're living in state-subsidised housing. You know, one thing about migration is that you kind of expect people to pay their own way. You know, they're not citizens. They haven't necessarily contributed into the welfare pot, so to speak. Should they be given subsidised housing if they're working? I think so. In many ways, yes, OK, it's reasonable, I think, for asylum seekers to have work, especially if they've been on this waiting list for so long. But on the other hand, you know, is it undercutting wages? Is it taking up resources in a way that it shouldn't from, you know, other communities?
Cindy?
Yeah, I think Fraser eloquently puts out the case against and the problems with the system, but I actually think, you know, I hold a different view on that, because when it comes to, for example, 80% of the pay, these are areas in which we have massive shortages of labour already. You know, these are the care homes, these are the fruit pickers, you know, all of these things that are designated shortage occupation lists by the government. Remember, this is the post-Brexit immigration system where the government can designate these occupations. So we need more people in these areas. And I would suspect that the Home Office thinking, you know, paying 80% is better than paying them full of what they could get, you know, if they were in the marketplace.
But then what we don't know, or don't appear to know at this stage, is what percentage of their housing costs they're having to pay.
So the Telegraph reports that is a contribution. We don't know how much that is contribution. But just on that second point that Fraser makes, you know, these are people who have been on the waiting list for more than a year, but haven't actually been given the right to stay.
Well, on that point...
So they're not in the market of houses, in the wider society, as it were. So we can't really let them go find landlords.
That point is addressed by Jenny, one of our viewers this morning. She said, I'm really concerned about this. How are background and criminal record checks carried out when these people have no proof of their identity?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect
if
that
after a year they still haven't been processed.
Well, I think you can probably prove your identity, but without proving your asylum claim is justified. If
criminal record check?
But you can get CBD checks anyway for any one job. You can get like a particular check just for that particular job you can get. That doesn't... Well, just because the government can't decide if you should stay in the country doesn't mean they can't decide if you're a criminal or not, if you see what I mean. But as an asylum seeker, you have to prove that you have a justified claim to stay in the country. You might not be a criminal, you might just be an economic migrant. And so for the government not to give you that kind of right.
It worries me about social care work.
Chris says, another one of our viewers, Chris says, do you want your very infirm and vulnerable elderly relatives being looked after by channel migrants who have chosen to break the law to get into the UK?
Well, I think the problem with the asylum system, and one of the many problems, is that in order to be even considered for asylum, you do have to be in the UK. So, that is inherently broken. It means that people do have to enter illegally. Clearly, it would be much better if we could process people from abroad. And we do actually, when there are specific wars and incidents, we actually do this quite well. I think, you find very few people who disagree with, the letting in people from Hong Kong or from Ukraine or things like that. But I don't know why we don't take this approach more generally. Why can't we decide before someone arrives, before they make either that treacherous journey or, go over a tourist visa or whatever it might be, however they might be staying here. Why can't we do that before they get here? And that would, I think, get rid of a lot of these problems, and it would get rid of the fact that, yes, many of these people are not genuine asylum seekers, but we just don't know until they've been processed.
No, I think that's a valid point. The Home Office just needs to get its act together with this. How it is so difficult, I don't know. Cindy, let's have a look at the front of the Mail, should we? We periodically, over the years, we have these sort of, I don't know if it's fair to call them anti-vaxxers but they decide they're not going to vaccinate the children. And as a result, then, several years later, we get these outbreaks, and now they're concerned about measles at the moment.
Yeah, they're concerned about measles at the moment. The ideal coverage rate is about 95% of children, but in some areas of the UK, it's only about 80% or just over 80%, which means that actually, you're left with hundreds of cases. Now, measles, 1 in every 5,000 children die. So it's actually quite a lot, if it was allowed to spread quite a lot. And we thought that it had been eradicated. But, as you say, Stephen, if people stop vaccinating their children, it comes back pretty quickly. And there's actually a really sad quote from a mum whose 6-year-old died from measles because she didn't vaccinate him and how guilty she feels now. It's terribly sad. But anyway, the health services are warning that, we're slipping towards that if we don't, start to have more.
Well, the thing is, I suppose we've been protected from measles for so long now. I think the vaccine came in the 50s or something, didn't it? That there's generations now who've never experienced it, and
don't realise how serious it is.
It's a killer. Measles is. So is rubella. I mean, the MMR vaccine is measles, mumps, and rubella, and rubella is an insidious, horrible disease because if you get it and you infect somebody who's pregnant, they will give birth to a deformed baby. It is that dreadful. And the MMR vaccine is very, very safe.
Yeah, and it's interesting that there are, this is a problem not just among children, but among a certain cohort of adults, people actually... basically, the sort of Wakefield generation, as they've been dubbed in the press.
It's Andrew Wakefield.
After Andrew Wakefield, the anti-vax doctor, published this highly misleading and now, totally debunked claim that the MMR jab causes autism. But they were saying in Birmingham, there are many teachers who don't have the jab because they were part of that generation. And, you can't blame the parents because in that case, because actually, it was the mainstream media who were making a lot of the claims about, saying that the vaccine wasn't safe. It was trusted sources. And even Tony Blair wouldn't say whether his children had been vaccinated. So, I think sometimes it can be easy to point the finger at sort of anti-vaxxers and say, they're stupid, idiots, conspiracy theorists, whatever. I mean, I'm sure some are. But, in the case of MMR, this was a much wider problem.
Well, and teenage boys, measles, infertility.
Is that right? Yeah.
And it's not just, 1 in 5,000 children might die, but a significant number end up in hospital, have lifelong complications. So, the case for vaccination is absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the other thing happening with this as well is our increased Muslim population, to put it candidly, because there are pork derivative parts of certain vaccines, but they're vegan alternatives. So, Jenny Harris, the head of the Health Service, is keen to emphasise that. But, for some Muslims, they're worried about, using a vaccine that's got pork components in there, basically.
Right.
But as you say, there are alternatives.
Yeah.
The point is to be willing to talk to your doctor about alternatives.
Talking to medical people, Dame Esther Ranson, she's pushing for an assisted assisted dying laws, and it's quite a strong front page of the Express, Fraser.
Yes, this is Esther Rantzen, who, very tragically, it's not got much left to live. She's been very candid, saying that she's, become a member of Dignitas and she plans to have an assisted death. And she's saying that we should change the law in the UK to liberalise our own system. I think. I think it's important to say that I think Esther Rantzen has slightly misrepresented the position of the UK. There have been about 530 people in the last 10 years who have gone to Dignitas, and none of them have been, and none of their family members and no one in connection has actually been arrested for this. And actually, there was a sort of change in how we prosecute these things thanks to Keir Starmer around 10 years ago. He changed the guidance on this. So I think there's a little bit of scaremongering about what you are.
Yeah, but that's only if you can
to
afford
do.
to go to Dignitas.
That's true, and it costs £10,000 or something on average to go to Dignitas. So it's something that's only available for people who have lots of spare money. She's calling for a parliamentary debate. I think there's nothing wrong with having a parliamentary debate, but it has been debated in Parliament many times over the years, and I think quite sensibly MPs have decided that it's probably just a bit too dangerous to liberalise these things, because it's very difficult to safeguard against abuse. And we've seen in certain countries, I think, particularly Canada, where you start off with what seems like a very limited law. In Canada, it started off where you can only have assisted dying if you're at imminent risk of death, you have a terminal illness. Very, very quickly, lawsuits come in, it expands. I mean, soon you're going to be allowed to have an assisted suicide simply if you're suffering from mental health problems. Now, I don't know what the difference is between that and a normal suicide.
No, apparently in Canada they've got some quite young teenagers who are insisting on their right for an assisted death.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that they just don't like living anymore.
And it seems as if...
Depression, in other words.
If someone wanted to, jump off a bridge, I hope you would save them. But if they say, well, I want an assisted suicide, we say, go ahead. I think that raises some serious moral questions.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, that is the issue with this. I'm not against it per se, but it's when you look at all the caveats that need to be brought in.
And I saw an interview with a disabled man recently who has, been in really dire straits, mentally speaking, and is now much, much better. And he basically said, if this was available to me at my worst moment, I would have taken it. But I'm so glad it wasn't available to me. And so it's just cases like that that make it very, very difficult. Because I'm like you, Stephen. I think that people should, if people commit suicide, they just do. And to give them the certainty, that nothing's going to go wrong if you need to do that, it's such a difficult issue, isn't it? But then with some cases, you don't want them to be feeling pressured or feeling that they can't get over this hump or whatever it is. But I think what's interesting is the Keir Starmer point that Fraser was mentioning, because, if Labour win this year, which is very, very possible, very maybe even probable, then this debate, I think, will come back into Parliament, and it is a vote of conscience. So there's no party whipping going on. The last time it was voted on was 2015. It's been that's 9 years since it's last been voted on. So it's possible that a debate happening after a Labour government comes in may well pass laws like this.
And that's almost equally worrying. You worry on both sides of the argument, don't you?
And I think in Scotland are looking at doing this separately as well to the UK. So it could be something that,
well, which would prove to be ridiculous, actually, because you just end up people just going
to
north
Scotland.
of the border.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It's very difficult. Very difficult, very difficult. Cindy, let's have a look at Prince Harry, should we?
Yeah. Yeah, slightly more cheerful. It's always fun to talk about Prince Harry and his numerous legal fights. So Prince Harry has decided to abandon a libel case he was levelling against the Mail on Sunday. The Mail on Sunday, this is over this bodyguard debate, basically. The Mail on Sunday had reported that Prince Harry didn't offer, had got spin doctors, basically, to get the public on side with his battle over whether or not the Home Office should provide him bodyguards in the UK. And Harry, just at the last moment yesterday, dropped the claims.
When
which,
they had to produce the evidence.
When they had to produce the evidence. So he's never had to produce the evidence, and he now faces a £750,000 bill to lawyers on both sides because it's not going to trial anymore. I mean, I think this is just one of the numerous cases that he's trying to go through with.
Bringing a libel case in this country is one of the most expensive things you could possibly do, and he's just learned that, hasn't he?
Yeah, and you know, he is this man that goes to court at the drop of the hat, it seems. I can't remember exactly which case, because he's suing so many different newspapers all at once, but, you know, there was one case where he didn't quite have the evidence. He was hoping that the trial would uncover the evidence, which is extraordinary in a sort of civil case. It's almost unheard of. You know, the problem for Harry is obviously he gets a tough time in the press. Then that means that he, largely because he's quite dim, unfortunately, so he gets a tough time in the press. Then that makes him angry with the press. You know, he wants to, go after suing everyone or calling for newspapers to be regulated and shut down. And then that just makes the press, quite understandably, even more hostile. So he has played the game very poorly. If he wanted the press to leave him alone, this is not the way to go about it.
I think it also sounds like he's been possibly not exploited necessarily, but taken advantage of by lawyers. You know, lawyers who have
the lawyers should surely have warned
Lawyers
him.
have really feasted on these press claims in the aftermath of the hacking scandal. Are definitely saying to him, you've got a case here, you've got a case there, you've got a case there. And for, as Fraser says, for someone who's grown up with this animus against the media, lots of things to be angry about justifiably, and lots of conspiracy theories about how the media works, then you've got these lawyers kind of confirming these things because they're charging by the hour.
Well, to be fair, even if he's approaching them and saying, I want to bring this case, they should be looking at the evidence and saying, this isn't going to
Well, it's possible in this case, at the last minute they said, we just don't think
We just don't have the evidence to disclose.
Yes, exactly. We just don't know what he didn't want to come to light in trial, basically.
Yeah, OK. Look, Fraser, Cindy, thank you both. We'll see you a little bit later on. Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Annie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to come ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel. Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of January. Today, 4 bodies, including a man and 2 young girls from the same family, have been discovered in a property near Norwich.
The government grants 16,000 asylum seekers the right to work in areas such as care, construction and farming under a Home Office scheme.
Prince Harry faces a legal bill of £750,000 after withdrawing his libel case against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday.
And the government backs proposals to make cat and dog thefts a criminal offence in England and Northern Ireland.
Here's a question for you. Could you do without your mobile today? Well, if you're up for the challenge, it is the time to put it to the test, as it's No Phones at Home Day.
Our children now, if they're on a trajectory to live till the age of 90, they will spend 25 years of their life looking at a screen.
Aidan's got your sport this morning.
Yes, indeed. Good morning. Emma Raducanu may be out of the Aussie Open, but there's still British interest in the singles. Cam Norrie in action as we speak. We'll have an update on his progress later this hour. And Jordan Henderson speaks of his LGBT plus regrets after turning his back on Saudi. More later.
And let's find out about Storm Isha is on its way. Annie Shuttleworth has the weather.
Good morning. Storm Isha's on the way for Sunday, but what's in store for the weather today? Well, you can find out all the details with me a little bit later on.
Morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Loads of you getting in touch over the migrant story.
Very upset, I think.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Tracy says, how twisted has our government become? On one hand, they're supposed to be stopping illegal immigration, and then they're suggesting they employ them in care homes. It's madness.
Jeff says no wonder they keep coming in the boats when they're getting work and free accommodation. This country is too soft.
Debbie says none of them should be working. They should all be detained and not let to roam and get deported straight away. This just makes it a pull to come to Britain. Oh, dear me. It's a difficult one. I mean, some people say, look, it would reduce our bill. We're forking out a load of money. It would reduce the bill. These people have been here for more than a year before they've been able to do this scheme, apparently.
But isn't it an incentive? Even more of an incentive? You know, go to Britain illegally, you know, after a year you'll be given a job.
You do wonder, don't you? Keep your thoughts coming through on that one. We're talking about it throughout the morning. But our main news today is that police have announced that 3 people, I should say, from the same family have been found dead at a property near Norwich, along with another lady, after officers forced their way into the house.
Now, according to the reports, the bodies of a 45-year-old man, a 36-year-old woman and 2 girls were discovered inside, and all apparently had injuries.
Yeah, the man and the 2 children are thought to have lived at the address. The police say the woman didn't live there, she was just visiting.
Norfolk and Suffolk police forces have cordoned off the area whilst they conduct forensic tests.
Well, let's talk to former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville, who's with us in the studio. What will be happening now, Mike?
Well, the forensic experts will be in there. There's several, and so they'll be looking at what we call wet forensics. So, is there any blood spattering? How has the death occurred? What clues can they find from fingerprints and DNA? There'll be digital specialists looking at CCTV, anything on computers, the Ring doorbells, people's iWatches and phones. What movements have they recorded? And also there'll be an intelligence cell which will be looking at the people involved. I mean, by the surnames that have been released in the local press in East Anglia, they indicate they're from Eastern Europe, so have they lived here a long time? What do we know about them? So there'll be a whole gathering of information, because the police seem to be indicating their hypothesis is that it's an isolated incident. What's happened is that it happened in that house. So they'll be looking at how did it happen, because of course we have the tragedy of 2 children now dying as well as 2 adults, and it would seem that the mother is somewhere. It's just a dreadful thing, but the best thing the police can do is just be able to give a picture of what actually happened. That'll be their main inquiry, so they can then report to the coroner.
I mean, we always say in situations like this, and it's always true, that we're looking at a house, it's part of a community, and the community will be really shocked. The idea that, you know, in the house almost next door, the house opposite, the house down the street, such a terrible tragedy can happen.
It is a terrible thing. And the other people to think about, the police officers who went round there at the start, they're probably young, you know, men and women, and we expect a lot of our officers. You know, I was quite thick-skinned, but when you're confronted with death, particularly death of children, so it'll have an impact on those officers as well. But I would say again, you know, we saw Norfolk Police do a good job with the Gaynor Lord investigation. That was a terrible tragedy where the lady was in the river, but Norfolk Police seem to have a good investigative team, and they've also got a good relationship with the press, where they seem to have the right balance about what they release to stop, you know, social media conspiracy theories and the like.
I know it changes case by case, but when the police come out so quickly and say we think this is an isolated incident, etc., etc., will the detectives have a working theory that they've got, even at this early stage?
Well, sometimes you can be confronted with, you know, we don't know what's happened in this case, but let's say you were confronted with somebody who'd written a suicide note, so you actually had a document laid out. We don't know what's happening here. Sometimes people have left video messages. We see that in terrorist cases and the like, don't we? So it would seem there's something where they've got a real good indication as what has happened. And you have to work to an hypothesis, but of course they will be looking wider, because you never quite know. And I'm sure that that's what they're doing, but there'll be all these different departments reporting. You've quoted the Detective Chief Inspector as the head of the inquiry, and he will be managing all those different parts to make sure that there'll be regular meetings to put all the information that they've got together.
Can I just ask you, you were saying you have to think about the police officers who are the first to arrive and they witness. I mean, I don't know how you get trained for that. It must be something that never leaves you. Overnight, we heard this story of a baby who'd been born only an hour before, left in a carrier bag in a street in the freezing cold night. Luckily, found in time and taken care of, and she's doing well. But I mean, have you ever come across anything like that?
Well, I've never found a baby on my own, but I've seen death in all its forms, and you just have to, I suppose, get used to it. And it's why you have a drink with your friends at the end of the night, just to get over that. But you do see some wicked and awful things. But I suppose a good thing is you join the police to serve the public, to make people feel safe, and that's it's an honour to investigate serious crime and be able to present the victims' families with the information. I think that's what, being a senior detective, that's the good thing about that.
What about compassion in all this? Because like with this baby story, obviously, you know, first and foremost, you think of the child, but also actually the mother in such a circumstance needs to be cared for, because something's gone horribly wrong somewhere. I mean, with all that, you've got to be careful not to rush to judgment, haven't you?
Yes, of course you have, and I suppose it changes when you have children yourself. I was in the Royal Military Police, and we were like the coroner's office, and I saw several post-mortems of children. And it's not until you have your own children, I suppose. And that's why you need a police force where you've got well-rounded individuals who've got a big experience of life, who've seen these things, and you feel that, because you know, the older you get, the less you rush to judgment, because you know that the world is not a perfect place.
No.
No,
Well, I know that the police there, and that's in London, Newham, I think, in London, they're sort of saying there must be a young girl, probably, out there somewhere who needs care and actually who needs help. You know, so...
Could well just...
Anyway, apparently the baby doing well, really well, apparently. They've named her Elsa, after a character from Frozen. And she's in hospital at the moment, but she will be in the care of the local authority unless they can find her mum.
Yeah. OK, we'll keep you up to date with that one as we get any more information. In the meantime, in relation to these deaths in Norfolk, Detective Chief Inspector Chris Burgess, who, as Mike was saying, is leading this investigation, says, I understand that news of this will be shocking to the local community. As soon as we can, we will release more information.
And he goes on, our investigation is in the very early stages, and this is clearly a very distressing and tragic incident.
OK, let's take you through some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning. And the Japanese Space Agency has made contact with its spacecraft after it successfully landed on the moon. It becomes just the 5th country in the world to do so. It's called the Moon Sniper. It's pretty much on target, actually, landed within 100 metres of the target location. But there are some problems with the solar power system, so it might live for just a few hours.
And the Met Office says injuries and danger to life are likely as Storm Isha brings strong winds and disruption to parts of the country this weekend. The strongest winds are expected tomorrow night into Monday morning, with 2 amber warnings issued. Most of the damage will apparently affect coastal areas from large waves and debris from beaches.
Tata Steel has confirmed up to 2,800 jobs will be affected, lost, basically, by its plans to close blast furnaces at its Port Talbot site. The cuts will be made over the next 18 months as the company transitions to a greener way of working. However, the unions say it's ready to use everything in its armoury to protect staff and defend the industry.
And nearly 16,000 Channel migrants living in Britain have been given the right to work across the country. That's according to data which was obtained under the Freedom of Information Law.
Yeah, so there are some rules and regs around this. They're paid 80% of the going rate in sectors facing shortages, such as care, construction and agriculture.
But apparently they do lose their £49 a week subsistence allowance, and they will have to contribute towards their accommodation costs.
Well, let's talk to former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and former Labour MP and Minister of State for Europe, Dennis McShane, who are both here. Good to see you both. What do you make of this, Dennis?
Very simply, Tony Blair, I remember being in government, he instituted this ban. And it seems in the last 2 or 3 years, under Suella Braverman, now James not very cleverly, it's been lifted. It's a huge, unbelievable scandal. I mean, I've been at GB News, you're at GB News. Every day in the recent 1, 2, 3 years, it's been migrants, boat people, and here they are being allowed to work.
A small number of them being allowed to work if they've been here for more than a year and they're contributing to their costs. Look, is that not financially sensible?
Oh, I was in Switzerland at the beginning of the year in a Swiss-British parliamentarian, ex-parliamentarian conflab. Liz Truss was there, for example, Daniel Hannam, very prominent anti-Europeans. And the Swiss guy said, look, we thought immigration was the main subject. The Swiss guy said, look, we have twice as many immigrants as Britain does, about 27% compared to 14% in the UK. How do we handle them? Once they've arrived here, we make them learn French and German, of course. We set them to work because we don't think the state, the Swiss taxpayer, should pay for them to be put up in hotels and given allowances. And we try and find them jobs. You do the very opposite. I mean, that's your decision. They were curious. And above all, in Switzerland, everybody, citizen, immigrant, everybody's got an ID card, so the state knows who's in the country. Theresa May abolished ID cards when she came into power in 2010. As a result, we haven't the faintest idea who's in Britain, and you can't get access to school, healthcare, social service in Switzerland if you don't show an ID card. So when are we going to get real about handling this problem? It's amateur hour at the moment in the House of Commons. It'll be defeated in the House of Lords. Mr Sunak is a brilliant Silicon Valley billionaire moneymaker. He hasn't the faintest idea how to handle this problem. And we've got these Home Secretaries who talk tough. Anyone been tougher or nastier immigrants than Suella Braverman? Mr Cleverly, I don't think, is quite in her category. And they've been allowing people we were told we're going to be very tough with to go out and earn a living.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, don't you find it fascinating, that it took an application under the Freedom of Information Act to get this information? The government haven't been freely telling us this. We had to find it.
Yes, and credit to the Telegraph who have exposed the scheme, but I think it might have been out there in other forms, just not picked up on. We don't know. I mean, the reality is we don't know the full extent of this particular scheme, and indeed, the people that do come into this country and who do claim asylum, not everybody is obviously sent back. Not everybody is earmarked for flights through Rwanda if they're ever going to take off. So some people who do obviously come into the country will be able to stay. So it's, I think, trying to draw a balance between those who have been in the system for far too long, over a year, being put up in a hotel at the expense of the taxpayer, not doing anything. Those people are probably, I would have thought, and I would assume are more likely to have a claim that is going to go in their favour rather than being deported. And I think because of the length of time that these cases take, it's better use to make sure that those people are doing something, whether it's in care, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's our construction sector, that are in contact with the system as opposed to being lost somewhere else and roaming around communities where we just don't know where they are. They're in contact clearly with the Home Office or HMRC because they're being paid. So it is better to have people, I think, doing things that are making a contribution where there is need to and where their case is probably going to be accepted as someone who is seeking asylum in this country rather than someone who shouldn't be here, that's chanced their arm, that should be deported.
Charlie, can I ask, are you still a member of the Conservative Party?
I am, yes.
Well, this is absolutely contrary. I've been coming on GB News 3-4 years, and all I've heard from Reform friends, Tory friends, is the utter opposite. We must be very tough. They must be sent home. Now, I completely agree with you. I've argued, let them earn a living and get off the state's back.
Well, I think there's a huge distinction between people that come into this country illegally and people who have to be processed quickly, and where you don't have a right to come into the country, then absolutely you should be deported. There is too many pull factors. There have been in the past. Those need to be closed down. Obviously, the Rwanda scheme is something that I think we should be having up and running as a deterrent to make sure that people that do come into the country illegally should not be able to cheat the system, that shouldn't be able to take up a space in a hotel, which personally I would rather see to go to a homeless bedroom, which is another scandal in this country.
We've got 19,000 people waiting to be processed. I mean, with Priti Patel and Suella Braverman and James Cleverly have not put the resources in. And I remember here Patrick Chisty, a wonderful report he did from Datchet-on-the-Thames, a guy who arrived across the Channel in 2015 when Theresa May was Home Secretary, still hadn't had his case.
Well, that in and of itself is a scandal.
Of course it is.
The Home Office has not been fit for purpose and is not processing these people as it should be. But nevertheless, we've got this issue that needs to be resolved. And from what we're hearing from Keir Starmer, what is the Labour Party going to do? I mean, if he follows your lead, then everyone who comes here is going to, while they're being processed, whether it's for 2 weeks or 2 years, are going to have the right to work.
I'm fairly certain Sir Keir will not follow my lead, because my lead is based on best practice in Sweden, in Germany, in other countries. And actually, the intelligent people in the Home Office, I mean, they must be mortified. I doubt if they told the Home Secretary, because none of them would quite understand what was going on. Now, it's a very fair point, Martin. When Labour, as seems likely, wins power, how do they handle immigration? We've never really quite got it right. And I can go right back to Enoch Powell days, 1970 days. I've got a mug at home that Ed Miliband handed out in 2015 saying, Labour controls on immigration.
Oh, really? That's worth a fortune. Don't you think that it stinks, somehow, that we weren't told this by by the Home Office.
Yes.
It took a Freedom of Information request.
It's absolutely outrageous, but we're talking about Suella Braverman and Priti Patel and poor James. You know, he wasn't a great Foreign Secretary, and he's even worse Home Secretary. And poor Mr Sunak, you know, he comes once every 2 or 3 weeks, a little meeting in Downing Street. I used to attend them. I'm sure you were there too, Charlie. And he has to wrestle with all of this, but it's completely outside his area of experience. So we've not thought through that policy. I mean, the big mistake was in 2010. We are finally beginning to know who was in the country. If we had ID cards in democracy, you can't say Sweden isn't a democracy, Switzerland isn't a democracy.
Yeah, but there was a whole issue. ID cards wasn't that simple. We were all going to have to fork out 80 quid to get one.
No, I got one. I've got one here. Do you want me to show it to you?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry.
You can see your driving licence.
No, it's not
proof of your identity.
It's not my driving. No, it's historic documents. Sorry, I didn't realise. Bus passes. Yes, old man stuff. Here we are. Here we are. There we are. That is a historic document, an official British national identity card issued in, I think, February or March 2010. About 70,000 were rolled out. The law, it was in the 2005 manifesto. The law was passed in the Commons in 2006, and then it disappeared into the blob of the Home Office. So nothing happened for 4 years. Started to be rolled out, about 70,000 issued. The Guardian was against it, the Trotskyists were against it, the National Front was against it, Nigel Farage was against it, and the Liberal Democrats were against it. So, of course, the Conservatives joined the Guardian comment pages, and the Liberal Democrats did what they wanted. I mean,
do you think the mood has changed towards identity cards?
I'm not sure, because everybody seems to think that if you have an identity card, the Gestapo are going to be walking down the street and asking. But actually, I lived in peaceful, Pacific, boring, well-regulated work there for a number of years in Switzerland and in France, and I know other European countries. There's no European country that doesn't have an identity card system. And if you want to access any public service, you've got to show this.
All right, just a very brief word, Charlie. Is this a good idea?
No, I'm not entirely sure how that would help the current situation that we're talking about if you are someone that's come into this country illegally, or if you're someone that does have an asylum claim to make. You're still in touch with the system because you're being paid. So I'm not quite sure how ID cards square that circle, but a debate for another time, maybe.
OK. Charlie, Dennis, good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed.
That's one for you to answer at home, please. gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you approve of identity cards? Would you have them? Would you have one now? Have you changed your mind?
I'd have one.
I think I would, and yet I was really vehemently against them 10, 15 years ago.
I just sort of think the driving licence it's not that much different to a driving licence, so why not just have one if it proves right to, you know, your right to rent or whatever it may be, and, you know, it sounds like a sensible system.
I think your digital footprint is out there anyway, isn't it, really?
There you go. But anyway, let us know what you think, because we need to look at that in more detail. In the meantime, let's see what Storm Isha is going to do over the next day or so. Here's Annie.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east, as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
Well, we've got a friend.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the government's plans to make these more than just things. Would you believe it or not? It's not actually against the law to steal one, or not a criminal offence.
Yes, not a criminal offence to steal one. And the trouble is, more and more thefts are going on, especially of beautiful pooches.
Oh, hello, darling. Anyway, so we're going to be talking to our little friend here, and the man who's looking after him in just a moment.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:26. Now, you don't need us to tell you that pets aren't just for Christmas, but at the moment, if a pet is stolen, they're considered missing property.
Well, that's all about to change because the government has now backed a proposal to make it a criminal offence to steal your cats or dogs. And it's really important because that sort of crime is on the rise. And you could find that a dog or a cat that you absolutely adore and has been part of your life for years and maybe is very important to you in emotional ways as well, could just be nicked. And then taken away, and it's not a criminal offence.
Crazy,
It will be.
Well, let's talk to dog trainer and owner of Master Dog London, Robin James, along with Ruby.
Good morning.
Morning to you. I mean, this is... I had no idea that was the law at the moment. It just seems utterly ridiculous.
It's a very old law. It goes back to, I think, the 1968 Criminal Theft Act. And there's 2,000 dogs stolen each year, which is 2,000 plus owners devastated every year.
It's a member of the family.
Absolutely, and it's so traumatic for these people when they lose a dog. They're almost looking for it, continuously trying to sort of look at every dog that's coming on. So it is really good that they're introducing this new bill. It will protect dogs and their owners from what, for the dogs, is absolutely, you know, they've got no way of understanding.
I mean, I was listening to the debate yesterday in the House of Commons, and, you know, very serious, big-time MPs were standing up and delivering really emotional evidence from their constituents as well, where dogs who have been vital to the life
of course.
A family, of a person, have been taken away and presumably sold elsewhere, or goodness knows what. And it's devastating to lose an animal like that. And again, they made the point that at the moment, the police can't really deal with it because at the moment it's just treated as though somebody sort of stole something out of your garden.
Exactly right. Stole your garden gnome.
Yeah, almost that. Yeah. And dogs and cats are more important than that.
But in the future, if we get this bill through, for up to 5 years in prison. So that is a real sort of flag to anyone who wants to do this.
What do we do to protect our dogs? Because even a dog like, what's she, a miniature poodle? What do you call it?
Toy poodle. Toy poodle.
So, I mean, what would she be worth? Because, I mean...
oh, my gosh. Well, she'd certainly be worth 1,000 or 2.
Yeah. This is the thing. We're talking
just to anyone.
We're talking a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that's why these criminal gangs, and that's what they are, are well organised, apparently.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, what can we do at the moment to protect from likely theft? Stephen was saying on your dog's collar...
Yeah, so he's on his collar, it says, "I am chipped and tattooed."
Oh, really?
So, I mean, then you just hope that's a deterrent.
Sure.
Well, that's as much as you can do.
You can also put a GPS tracker on your dog's collar or an Apple AirTag on your dog's collar, know where they are at any time. However, any thief is going to get rid of that straight away.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's devastating for people. There's not really much you can do. When I was a child, it'll be normal to open your front door and let your dog go out for a walk.
Yeah.
But now people wouldn't dare do that. So there's no random dogs roaming around on the streets today. No. But back in the day, that was absolutely normal. And, you know, I really do feel very deeply for these people because for them it's so traumatic. Unless it's happened to you, I don't think you can really understand.
You're never going to actually get over it.
They don't get over it. They really don't. I've met so many of them and it really is tear-jerking, you know, that they're sort of feeling so much. And there's no, well, we can get you another one that looks the same. Then, no, I want my...
Like that, no.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the other thing we can all do is be part of... I mean, if you're looking for a beautiful puppy or a kitten or whatever, is don't go to dodgy people.
Absolutely.
For them, because they probably have got them.
Absolutely. You've got to avoid going to the Facebooks and to the Gumtree adverts, and you've got to go towards reputable sites like the Kennel Club, which is an amazing resource.
So but people go there because it's easy and it's cheaper.
And unfortunately, when it's cheaper, you do pay for what you get. And, you know, in some cases, you're going to have a dog who's missing desperately their owner, and you're thinking, why is my dog so depressed? This new dog, which was meant to be great for me. They never forget.
Sorry, I can't resist.
Please.
It's the advantage of not being wired to the desk. I just can't resist. I cannot. How old is she?
15 weeks.
Will she get much bigger?
Not much bigger.
Oh, yeah, tiny little thing.
And is she one of your puppies that you have been training?
Yeah, so I found her using my puppy finding service, and then she came to my puppy boot camp, and she was with me for 10, 11 days. She went to her owners on Boxing Day.
Oh, wonderful.
As a Christmas present when they arrived, and their 3 young sons were so elated. It was beautiful to see. And they've gone away again, so she's come back.
Oh, I see. She's staying with you temporarily.
Yeah, which I love. I take them.
How many other dogs are you doing at the moment, training?
Oh, just one other.
Oh, just one other, OK.
So you get lots of attention, then?
Yes. I've actually got another toy poodle.
Oh, right.
It's like I'm Noah's Ark at the moment. I have 2 by 2.
gorgeous. She's absolutely
Thank you so
gorgeous.
much for
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
And
So
we'll know
lovely to
about
see you.
that
Can we
bill will
keep
be
her?
passed. I think
It's going to, well,
I hope so.
everybody feels that.
who's
way.
going to vote against
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, bye-bye. Don't want to let you go. I don't want to let you go. No, I don't.
She's so friendly.
Oh, she's a lovely girl.
Well, for our
And you
makeup
could give her
artist,
to
I mean,
anyone. She's exactly the
place
same.
for nose.
Yeah.
Are you done?
Right, yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Do you want to go? You can go, actually, can't you?
I can.
Because
Yeah, you go and
Yeah, you
take
go.
her out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
See you
to see
later.
you.
Bye.
Keep her in
Wonder
the
I-
studio. Stephen will be all over it.
Yeah, I won't be able to concentrate on anything that Aidan's got to say this
Yeah,
morning.
but Aidan is here, willing to go. Right, go for it,
So
aren't you?
sweet, so sweet. Just talk about tennis.
Yeah, Emma Raducanu had a rough week.
Oh, hasn't she?
Sorry, that's a pun.
Oh, rough. Oh. Get out.
I do apologise. Look, she had a rough week. Yes, she was looked like she was going to be sick on court. It was a 3-set
did
defeat.
she?
Yeah,
look, it was
wobbly.
but it was a good comeback. I saw evidence. I don't know if you agree, Anne, that she might return to something akin to her best. She looked a little bit more of a physical specimen than even she was in 2021. She looked as if she'd been putting the work in to try and get back to where she was.
Yeah, but she's already talking about competing in lower-level tournaments, isn't she? Which is a pretty strong indicator.
Well, not necessarily, Stephen. Sometimes players do that when they just want to get match practice, they want to get the hours in, they want to get some confidence beating players. It's a bit like in football, you know, you want to get a striker's confidence back, you put up against the youth team.
Yeah, she clearly suffers from this build-up of tension when she's in a very, very big match with everybody watching her. And maybe playing in lower-level tournaments will build up that courage in her
Yeah,
again.
I mean, she's had 2.5 years, not away from the court, but she's had a lot of upheaval in those 2.5 years. There have been injuries, there have been wrist surgery, there have been personnel issues with coaches. I think 7 coaches in that time. Not all of them were her fault. Some of the early coaches who had coached her in her amateur career just couldn't commit to her schedule around the world, and that's understandable. So it's not all been self-inflicted. She took on too many commercial opportunities as well.
Do you think it's harder for a very young, beautiful woman like her than for the men? I know.
Why?
Well, because you're under such scrutiny, particularly from the media.
I think you have to...
Everybody fell in love with Emma, didn't they?
They did, and rightly so. She didn't drop a set, Anne. I've never seen anything like that before. I've covered sport for 22 years. I've supported sport for many years even before that. Never seen anything like it. I think the key here, and we spoke about it with Luke Littler in the last hour, is you've got to manage your schedule. You have to be ruthless, even though you've got PR companies and representatives saying, look, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? I'm on 10%, 20% or whatever. That's what's really underlying all this. And 20% of Emma Raducanu's earnings is a significant amount of money to anybody. So she has to be ruthless. I mean, apparently she's trimmed down the personnel around her. She had somebody who was in charge of fluids, for example, somebody who was in charge of food. And so she's trimmed. That's a lot. You know, we do live in an era where sports people do travel around the world with a large entourage. Maybe for somebody at her age, it's not the best thing to do. If she's fighting the crowds, you don't want a crowd of entourage, I guess, do you?
You know.
But Cam Norrie's in action right now. He's the only...
Right now?
Right now. He's taken the first set against Casper Ruud. This would be an
He's
excellent...
quite high up the...
He's a 2-time French Open finalist and he's world number 11 right now. This would be an exceptional win if Norrie could hold on. I believe it's on serve in the second set. He's had a couple of wrist injuries as well, Cam Norrie, but yeah, he had that breakthrough, didn't he, back in 2022 at Wimbledon, and he's a real hope. And as I say, we'll be keeping an eye on his progress as the day goes on. We should have a conclusion to the match by the end of the breakfast show.
Oh well, let's hope so. Jordan Henderson.
That's right, yeah, he's completed his move to Ajax. There have been strong suggestions that there was a tax implication to the move to Holland. Had he come back to the Premier League, he would have been given a £7 million tax bill. Yeah, it does make you think twice and brings things into focus a little bit. But he gave a press conference in Amsterdam yesterday with his new club. And he addressed, not for the first time, but all the criticism he had, not just the other week when he said he was when we revealed that he was unhappy in Saudi, but also last summer when he upset the members of the LGBTQ+ community by going to Saudi, having pledged his support for the cause, and then he just takes the dollar on offer. I'm not sure what the currency is in Saudi, actually. I must look that up.
Probably is dollar, actually.
Probably is, yeah. They sell pretty well anyway, don't they? So he gave this quote yesterday: if anyone was offended or feels as I upset them, that's on me. It was never my intention. My beliefs have never changed and never will. Again, I can only apologise if people feel let down. I asked you before how you felt about it. You have genuine support of what he did moving to Saudi, weren't you?
Yeah, I just thought that, I don't think you can hold everyone to the You know, and to be honest, if you're going to change anywhere, you change it from within, not from yelling on the outskirts.
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't see a problem with it, really.
There are other considerations as well. There's the Euro 2024 this summer. I don't really think realistically, and I would have thought Gareth Southgate had a chat with him. He was very loyal to him over the years as England captain, and I don't think he could really have lined up in the Euros with England, having spent a season at such a low level in Saudi. I think Ajax is a good kind of middle-range step. It's probably not elite level in European football now, but it's a good competitive level. They do generally play in the Champions League, and so I think that will give him the practice he needs to give him a fighting chance of making that squad. He complained about the climate. I don't think he'll have that much of a problem in Holland readapting. No. It's not probably similar to Liverpool where he was, I imagine.
Yeah, probably something like that. Aidan, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Do stay with us. We're going to be going through the drama that ensued following this year's release of the Hot Priest calendar. Yes, the Hot Priest calendar. That's next in the paper review.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:42, let's have a look at the headlines today with Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, and Assistant Editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Good morning to you both. Fraser, let's kick off with Tata Steel and what they're saying, Port Talbot being sacrificed to the angry god of net zero.
Yes, this is the tragedy of the loss of 2,800 jobs in Port Talbot in Wales, at the UK's largest steel-making plant. So this has been a long time coming, actually. The two last blast furnaces are going to be scrapped and they're going to be replaced with an electric arc furnace. So that will mean that steel will be made in a more green fashion.
But only recycled steel.
But only recycled steel. So there's lots of big implications for this. Obviously, this is absolutely devastating, not only for the people who directly are losing their jobs as a result of this, devastating for the town and the local community, because, you know, in towns like Port Talbot, I mean, it is the steelworks. There's nothing, there's nothing beyond that. I mean, you know, so many towns and villages in the 1980s are still scarred by the deindustrialisation of the 1980s. And I think we're now going to see a sort of wave of net zero deindustrialisation, unfortunately. And it has national implications for the UK because, as you just said, Stephen, you know, this new eco-friendly arc furnace can only make recycled steel, or it can't make fresh virgin steel, which is actually the type of steel that is used for most manufacturing purposes. So it severely downgrades our capacity as a country to make what is a vital ingredient for other processes. That has implications not only for industry, but also for defence and things like that.
So it's a falsehood as well, isn't it, in that it will cut Wales's emissions, yes, but we will still have to buy virgin steel from other countries, which are going to have to boost their manufacturing of it in order to make up for Wales's loss. So the planet isn't going to benefit.
Well, this is the, you know, often the sort of paradox of net zero. That's right. You know, if you force industry elsewhere, we still need all of these goods. You know, the need hasn't gone away, so they'll just be made in China or somewhere like that. Now, you know, the British steel industry has been in crisis for a long time. Other countries have been eating our lunch in these terms for many years. But it is fair to say that net zero here has delivered the decisive blow. And what's tragic about that is that, you know, there are many people on the Labour Party up in arms about this, but they're, if anything, even more, you know, evangelistic for this process of decarbonisation, and are not thinking about, you know, the consequence for jobs, the consequences for industry and for working people that this is going to have.
I think we have to be careful when we talk about this because, I mean, Tata Steel is a private company, right? We have to be careful not to talk about it as if it's a government decision to close, to change these furnaces.
The government's given them a load of money to encourage
to keep the jobs, and so it was 500 million has been already been committed, 500 million pounds. So what are we actually saying here? That we want more taxpayers' money going into Tata Steel so that they can keep the jobs going? I'm not sure that is the option. But I think where the government has failed is not creating the green jobs that Boris Johnson talked about when he first talked about net zero a few years ago. You know, he promised 100,000 jobs. And actually what we're seeing is that not just on steel, but on renewables, other countries are eating our lunch too. So when you look at a country like Denmark, it actually consumes less wind power than the UK does, but it has more wind power jobs. So why are we not creating the jobs? If we're gonna go full steam ahead with net zero, then let's at least bring some of the jobs here, which is what we were promised, but that's not happening at the moment.
And of course, the leader in, you know, producing renewable energy is China. But the reason they're able to do that is because they have cheap electricity, and they have cheap electricity because they are not cutting down on their use of fossil fuels. So again, it's this very strange paradox that you know, people need to get their heads around. There's no future of, you know, using less energy. We will need much more energy as the world continues to expand, as populations continue to grow, and as our needs get more. You know, we want to be a richer country. That involves using more energy. We need it to be cheaper, but unfortunately, net zero is doing the opposite of that. So it's kind of almost like a vicious cycle in a way. We're not even getting good at producing the green jobs.
Yeah. OK, let's have a look at the Financial Times, Cindy, should we, where the war leadership, the war cabinet in Israel is feeling the strain.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think back to before October 7th, Israeli politics is very, very divided. You know, you've got coalition governments being formed all the time, Netanyahu's opponents trying to get him out or even lock him up, but failing, and he's still around as Prime Minister. And then October 7th happens, you know, this war cabinet comes together of these previously feuding politicians. But frankly, those enmities are still there. And it's not just personal enmities. There are some real disagreements over the best way to get the hostages back. You know, there are still over 100 hostages in Gaza at the moment. Their families are devastated. You know, there was that 1-year-old baby who had birthday this week in captivity. And they're questioning, you know, is the current strikes, are they the right way to get these people back? And Netanyahu seems to want the war to continue because he knows that there's going to be a reckoning for him when this conflict calms down a little bit, because he was the one who allowed October 7th to happen. So what we're seeing now is that war cabinet basically publicly disagreeing with each other on Israeli media. And
I wonder how that will play out.
Exactly.
Over the coming months.
And Netanyahu this week has also rejected the idea of a two-state solution for Palestine as well, which the Arab states were trying to get together as a negotiating tool for getting the hostages back.
That's the obvious solution.
Well, so the question is, what does he actually want from this? Where does he see the medium term ending up being for Gaza? It's incredibly difficult, and clearly people in his war cabinet are not happy about it.
No.
And the trouble is that the world is sort of changing its stance as well, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Very supportive at the beginning, asking lots of very uncomfortable questions now.
Yeah, that's right, as particularly as the sort of civilian death toll mounts, and people, you know, there are disagreements about what are legitimate aims for Israel. I think anyone, you would be mad to think that the hostages were not the sort of first and foremost aim. I don't think that Israel can pull out or stop what it's doing until at least that question is resolved. How best to resolve it, I don't know. But yeah, how far do they go in sort of breaking Hamas is you know, an important question. It's very much up in the air.
Let's have a look at the very weird and wonderful world of online media, Fraser, because I mean, of all the stuff that's going on with Yemeni rebels and the Houthis and all the rest of it, there's one young man who's saying awful things about the UK, threatening the UK and the United States, but he's sort of been an internet sensation because he's quite good looking.
Yes, I mean, this is one of the many, part of the sort of post-October 7th derangement that we're experiencing in the West, where people now have a sort of Houthi rebel pin-up. He's been compared to the actor Timothée Chalamet, and people have dubbed him Tim Houthi Chalamet. And there are viral videos of him, you know, jumping onto ships in the Red Sea. People are swooning over him. I mean, you know,
but
on the one hand,
he's saying he's longing for martyrdom.
That's right, because he's part of this, you know, vicious Islamist Houthi cult, and you know, this is one of the strange things that has happened in the West, is that we're sort of now elevating anyone who happens to be an enemy of Israel, no matter how vicious or terrible they are. You know, the Houthis are their literal slogan has anti-Semitism embedded in it. It's the slogan is "Death to the US, death to Israel, a curse on the Jews, and victory to Islam." So if you have any doubt where they stand on these issues, they're often being confused for Yemen itself, which I think is outrageous. You'll see on now the pro-Palestine chants, people have started singing, you know, Yemen, Yemen, do us proud, turn another ship around. But they don't represent Yemen. They are, you know, a rebel group. They've overthrown the government. They're repressing Yemeni people. So, yeah, it's almost as if someone is against Israel, if someone is against the West, suddenly we become, or certain type of Westerner becomes infatuated with them. It's utterly bizarre.
I think it's a real story of our TikTok age, isn't it?
Yes.
You saw that video. He's very famous on TikTok in particular. So what we have is like a Gen Z, you know, who are so loving these short clips and really visually appealing things, and not really thinking much about the politics behind the thing.
They're probably not listening for a minute to what he's saying. They're just looking at his face, giving him pop star sort of fan.
Exactly. Yeah. It's literally pop stardom, like fanboying. One hopes that when this generation gets slightly older, you know, they read behind the headlines and all that sort of stuff. But the worry is that TikTok melts your brain, basically.
Slightly reminiscent of the Bin Laden trend on TikTok.
Yeah.
I don't know if people remember that a few months ago. people discovered Osama bin Laden's letter to America, and suddenly it became a viral sensation on TikTok. And, you know, obviously it's mad. To give some context, there are parts of his letter to America that he wrote after 9/11 that do sound a little bit like... there are bits of it where he's complaining about the climate crisis, he's complaining about consumerism. He does in
There's a Venn diagram of
in between the, you know, if you put the Islamist terrorism and the anti-Semitism on one side, there are times when he sounds like a woke Westernist. But yeah, people were saying it's blown my mind, this progressive Osama bin Laden.
Lord, I know, people don't think enough. Meanwhile, Cindy, let's end on... Because anyone who's been to Rome knows that you can't go anywhere without seeing a Hot Priest calendar on sale. But there's a problem with it.
No, there was a Hot Priest calendar. Yeah, I have to say, Stephen, I didn't know either. And I have been to Rome, so maybe...
They're on all the newsstands.
Yeah, and what's happened, basically, the photographer behind the Hot Priest calendar has actually admitted that most of them are not actual priests.
What?
Now... We had a look at the pictures.
They're models?
Yeah, they're models, or sometimes they're just ordinary men who are teachers or whatever. But it's because the pictures look candid. You know, they look like, you know, you're just capturing a priest on the streets. It's not like a photo shoot. You expect them to be genuine priests. Anyway, so there we go. We were just talking about how it's false advertising and people need to get their money back.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Surely part of the attraction of these priests is that they're unavailable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people might remember the hot priest character in Fleabag that seemed to capture the nation's attention a couple of years ago. So, you know, they have to be real priests if you're going to sell them as priests, I think.
Yeah. Well, should be, yes.
There must be hot priests out there, young, you know.
Oh, there are. No, you see, I've noticed the real thing. When you go to Rome, there are, you know, great lines of them, aren't there, going in and they do look, I mean, there's something about the priest outfit, isn't it? Outfit, but you know what I mean, that is very sexy.
Oh, Anne.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Go to Rome, have a look.
That's why you kept going back.
Absolutely, I love Rome.
Booking the Ryanair flight right now.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Who'd have thunk it?
Brings out the lapsed Catholic in me.
There you go. Well, as long as they're real, we need to check their credentials.
Well, I never thought to, but I will.
No, I think you should. Right, lovely. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Let's get a check on the weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east, as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of January. Today, 4 bodies, including a man, his 2 young girls and a woman from the same family, have been discovered in a property near Norwich.
The government grants 16,000 asylum seekers the right to work in areas such as care, construction and farming under a Home Office scheme.
Prince Harry faces a legal bill of £750,000 after withdrawing his libel case against the publisher of the Mail on Sunday. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the latest.
Well, a night of celebration for Prince Harry at the Aviation Awards in Los Angeles, but his spokesperson has hit back over his fight against the Mail. More details shortly.
The government backs proposals to make cat and dog thefts a criminal offence in England and Northern Ireland.
And how could you manage without your mobile today? Well, if you fancy a challenge, today is the time to put it to the test, as it's No Phones at Home Day.
Our children now, if they're on a trajectory to live till the age of 90, they will spend 25 years of their life looking at a screen.
Well, good luck with that. Aidan's here with your sport.
Yes, indeed. He is no flash in the pan. Teenage darts sensation Luke Littler followed up his final appearance at the Worlds earlier this month, I should say, by winning the Bahrain Masters final yesterday. And we will have an update on Cam Norrie's progress in tennis at the Aussie Open.
Also coming up for you, it's going to be a bit of a weird weather weekend. Annie Shuttleworth has the details.
Good morning. Storm Isha's on the way for Sunday, but what's in store for the weather today? Well, you can find out all the details with me a little bit later on.
morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Loads of you getting in touch on the mumps, measles, rubella jabs, because there's warnings in one of the papers today.
Front page of the Daily Mail.
Saying there's a measles outbreak again, and it's just because not enough children have been vaccinated, and it's not the children now, is it? It's when they get a slightly older. Marion says, I was born in the 50s, but was never vaccinated against measles or mumps. But because most people got these diseases, the strains tended to be milder and therefore fewer side effects.
No, I'm not sure that's true.
No.
Measles is a killer. Rubella is a killer. I think probably mumps is very, very dangerous as well. One of my sons had mumps and it was awful. And he'd had the vaccine. But the MMR vaccine is safe. We've been using it since the 1950s, and all of the trauma about it having problems was completely untrue and totally debunked.
But you see, I think that's the issue, isn't it? We've got so used to nobody or not very many people catching any of this that you forget it's serious. I didn't really think about mumps or measles or rubella being serious things.
I did when I went to school. You were off school for weeks if you had measles, weeks, and you were very ill. And some children did die of measles. It's
1 in 5,000 apparently.
It's something that, because so many generations have now not seen measles, I think people have become a bit complacent about the vaccine. You've got to get it, protect your children and protect other people's children.
Yeah, so
And
that's the
protect
message for you.
pregnant women against rubella as well, because if you contract rubella and you're pregnant, you will give birth to a deformed child. It's that important.
Anyway, well, there's a message for you. Billy says, thank heavens I was born in the 60s. I had all my jabs. There was no fuss back then. And if there was anti-vax people, there were few and far between.
Yeah, you just went along and did it. You went
just
along to
did
your
it.
local clinic, didn't you?
Didn't think about it.
No, that's right.
Anyway, look, more thoughts on that welcome this morning. But let's tell you about our main news today. And police have announced that 4 people from the same family have been found dead at a property near Norwich after officers forced their way into the house.
According to the reports, the bodies of a 45-year-old man, a 36-year-old woman and 2 girls were discovered inside, and apparently all had injuries.
Now, it's thought the man and the children lived at the address. The police say the woman didn't live there, she was just visiting.
Norfolk and Suffolk police forces have now cordoned off the area and they're conducting forensic tests.
Let's talk to former police officer Oliver Lawrence, who joins us now. I mean, just horrific, Oliver. I mean, what an awful situation. How do police even begin investigating something like this?
Yeah, it is completely tragic. Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Anne. The police officers will start, as with every complex murder investigation, with a comprehensive forensic analysis of both the property, that's both the wet forensics, that's the digital forensics, and this is where years of policing and investigative work by the senior investigating officers and his or her team really comes to the forefront. And more importantly, the importance of family liaison officers in policing, working with the families to better understand, the story and the history, which is critically important in building the pictures to answer the questions which the public and the immediate community will be yearning for, because this is a complete and utter tragedy.
We've been learning throughout the programme this morning, actually, that the police, when investigating this sort of thing, look for the digital footprint that we all leave behind. We wear watches. You just heard mine go off. We've got those Ring doorbells that have got cameras in them. There will be sort of digital ways that the police will be able to piece together the last few moments of these people's lives.
That's incredibly correct, Anne. It's a new age of policing. This digital world that we live in, we do leave a very complex footprint, whether that be our WhatsApp messages and the images we send, to sharing our live locations, to the running applications that we have on our phone, which show the direction and paths that we travel, to the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi devices that our phones try to connect with. It does build an incredible picture and allows police to very quickly develop a hypotheses, which then they can communicate out to the public, which is the most important thing I think we've learned so far, so importantly over the last 12 months, that the communication with the public is vitally important in making sure that we don't have armchair detectives and members of the community making comments which can lead an investigation into an array of disarray. It's very, very important.
What are we to make, Oliver, of the fact that police have said they believe this is an isolated incident?
Tragically, it would appear that obviously this is a family-related issue, which, I understand police had visited the address prior to Christmas. But I think it's probably far too early to call in terms of sort of what is the modus operandi, what could be the events, who could be the offender in this. All we know is that we've tragically lost 2 children and a family to circumstances which have led to this incredibly grave outcome. But I think the isolated incident commentary from police is to appease the community in just making sure that they're aware there are nobody else involved in this, and that to sort of calm people's concerns that somebody may be at large.
OK, thanks very much indeed for that. The police have issued a statement. Detective Chief Inspector Chris Burgess, who's leading the investigation, has said this: "I understand that news of this incident will be shocking to the local community, and as soon as we can, we will release more information."
Yeah, he went on to say the investigation's at a very early stage, and this is clearly a very distressing and tragic incident.
Now to something that, my goodness, has really got you going at home, is all I can say. Thank you so much. We love your views and we'll continue to read some of them out on this subject. But my goodness, you feel very strongly about it, to put it mildly.
Yeah, it's about 16,000 Channel migrants who are currently in Britain, who've been in Britain for quite some time, we understand it, but they have been given the right to work. That's according to data obtained under Freedom of Information laws.
Apparently they are paid 80% of the going rate in sectors that are facing staff shortages, like care, construction and agriculture.
They do lose their £49 a week subsistence allowance, and they do have to contribute towards accommodation costs. So how much they have to contribute, we don't know.
Well, judging from your views, you don't think it's a terribly good idea. And isn't it interesting that it took a Freedom of Information request to find out about it? Let's speak to former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, who's joined us now. It's really got people very upset. Did you know this was going on?
No, and also, well, look, there are 2 answers to this. I can offer you a choice of answers. I can say it's a good thing or a bad thing. Which do you want first?
I don't know.
Well, let's go for a good thing. Go on, let's book the train.
A lot of people have arrived here wrongly and in breach of all the rules, but they're hanging around, taking money. Why shouldn't they work? However, if you're somewhere else in the world and for some reason, and it still baffles me why people think Britain is the land of heart's content and that, there's no other place on earth that's as good. But if people are wondering whether to take the risk, insofar as there is a risk of coming over, well, then why make it easier for them to make the decision to come by allowing them to work? Look, the problem with all of this, and I spent 5 years as a Home Office Minister, if you're in the Home Office, you have to have rules. And if you don't have rules, you become a shambles. Now, your starter for 10 is what we have at the moment a rule-led business, or is it a shambles? Well, you can't have opinions.
No, we can't answer that.
But I think it's a shambles. And why do I think it's a shambles? Because the rules are broken as soon as they are made. As soon as these people set foot on a beach, all these lawyers descend upon them at public expense, and they come in an instant and they leave, if they do, and they probably don't, over years. This is a shambles. So someone at some point has got to say to themselves, do we just continue with this shambles, which includes, by the way, lying to the British people? If you look at what ministers have said for the last 20 years about people coming in, they say we're going to keep the numbers down. All of them have failed. And, I must say, I don't consider myself particularly a man committed to telling people the truth. I was a politician after all. But we got somewhere nearer the truth then than we do now. The public are being lied to, and what you're hearing from people on the programme today, viewers who are writing in, is they are sick of being lied to.
Is this a point? Could you look at this though and say maybe it's a trial? 16,000. It's a comparatively small number. Are they trying this out to see if it works?
Well, I mean, look. At the end of the day, a terrible thought occurs to me. You know, I wake up screaming in the night when I look ahead and think, one day someone's going to say, we can't stop them, let them all come in. And that's what we're getting near to. Now, there was a chance to stop a lot of this nonsense, but the reason it failed was that there was no... Look, if you can't keep the lawyers out of it, if you can't say to the courts, you are the courts of this country, you are not the courts for any old Tom, Dick or Harry from anywhere in the world who happens to turn up on our shores. Clear rules should have been set up, and if it is contrary to the European Court of Human Rights, whatever, well, you just have to say, sorry, we run this country. And, you know, when I was a Home Office Minister, you did an investigation of the European Court of Human Rights. Now, of course, this was a few years back. A number of those people have been apparatchiks under communist governments, and they're appointed to the European Court of Human Rights. They know nothing about Britain and care even less, and yet they determine the law, which is actually... There will come a tipping point, won't there? I mean, when I think I've lived in London, I'm celebrating 50 years living in London. London was a pretty grubby place when I arrived, and I don't think I made it any less grubby. But the thing is, it wasn't like it is today, which is often very smart. But, of course, a lot of the people that come in are not... Well, they may be smart, but they're not necessarily the kind of people that you want in. And the problem that we have got is that the people who are now in this country and cannot be removed are often people who are turning this country into something profoundly undesirable. Reading today about, that there's even a luxury tour now to get in for people from parts of Eastern Europe where we know they're only coming for criminal purposes.
Just very briefly, David, because we're officially out of time. Pauline's been in touch saying our government's deluded. It's going to be reform for me at the next election. I know you're not a member of the Conservative Party anymore, but you're clearly of the Conservative ilk, shall we say. Are you more drawn to what reform? Because they're obviously much more hard line on this and get out of the ECHR and what have you. A reform taking a position that the Conservatives should have, do you think?
No, but look, he's a jolly nice chap, Richard Tice. I occasionally bump into him, funny enough, in these studios. Charming man, kind to animals, helps old ladies across roads. A model for any woman. He'd be a model person for their daughter to marry. But has he got a clue about running this country? Zero. The idea that someone can just wander in and come out with a lot of plans that are going to work, it's just a joke. But the trouble is that when the people who claim to be politicians are failing, then people who are not really politicians but would like to be come in and say, yeah, give us a go.
OK. David, we've got to leave it there. We'll see you a little bit later on. Thank you.
There's plenty to chew over, isn't there? Do let us know your views, gbviews at gbnews.com. It's 8:15. Right, here are some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning.
The Japanese Space Agency has made contact with its spacecraft after it successfully soft-landed on the moon. Just the 5th country in the world to manage that. It's called the Moon Sniper. It landed pretty much on target, but there are problems with the solar system, so it may live for just a few hours.
The Met Office says injuries and danger to life are likely as Storm Isha brings strong winds and disruption to parts of the country this weekend. The strongest winds are expected tomorrow night into Monday morning, with 2 amber warnings issued. Most of the damage will affect coastal areas, from large waves and debris on beaches.
Tata Steel has confirmed nearly 3,000 jobs will be affected by its plans to close blast furnaces at its Port Talbot site. The cuts made over the next 18 months as the company moves to a greener way of working. However, the Unite Union says it will use everything in its armoury to protect staff and defend the industry.
Now to Prince Harry. Hours after withdrawing his High Court libel claim against the Mail on Sunday, Prince Harry has arrived at an awards ceremony in Los Angeles.
Well, what else do you do on a Friday night? The Duke of Sussex says he wants to focus on the safety of his family and his legal action against the Home Office.
Now, he was suing the Mail on Sunday over an article about his publicly funded security arrangements when visiting the UK.
So he'll now have to pay legal costs for the Mail on Sunday, as well as his own, and that could hit, we think, about £750,000.
It's an expensive mistake to make, isn't it? Let's bring in our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, for the latest. Well, I hope he had a good night at the awards. But my goodness, what a big legal bill he's now going to have to pay.
I know. I mean, the whole awards have been completely overshadowed, I think, by the fact he has decided to pull out of this libel case against the Mail on Sunday. The Mail reported that £750,000 Prince Harry's going to have to pay in legal costs. I actually spoke to Prince Harry's spokesperson last night, and they were saying that it's way too early to speculate as to the kind of amount of money Prince Harry is going to have to pay, but they certainly did not dispute it's going to be a pretty hefty legal bill for him. This all obviously relates to an article written about his separate case against the Home Office and his security arrangements, where the Mail on Sunday alleged that Prince Harry had tried to spin the narrative to put him in a more favourable light and perhaps to make the public feel sorry for him. Prince Harry then sued the paper for libel, saying that it was an attack on his honesty and integrity and would undermine his charity work and efforts to tackle misinformation online.
Right, so why has he pulled out now at the very last minute?
Well, yesterday, papers were due to be filed from both sides, Prince Harry and Mail on Sunday, for this case to go to a trial. Prince Harry decided not to allow his lawyers to give papers to the judge because then, of course, all these papers would then be in the public domain. So we can speculate as to why he perhaps did that. Maybe he thought he wouldn't win the case, or there were certain details in those papers which he didn't want in the public domain.
So probably he never thought it would come to that. Maybe he thought the Mail on Sunday would settle.
Well, he wanted a summary judgment. So he wanted the judge to essentially rule in Prince Harry's favour without the need to go to a trial. In December, the judge said that the Mail on Sunday could potentially win this case with the honest opinion defence. Prince Harry's spokesperson still disputes the honest opinion defence because they are saying that the article in question was in the news section of the newspaper rather than the opinion section of the newspaper. They also say now that Prince Harry's priority is the safety of his family rather than, and I quote, the proceedings giving a continued platform to the Mail's false claims all those years ago. Of course, the Mail has always denied any wrongdoing.
Meanwhile, as we keep saying, partying away last night. What was it? Legends of Aviation?
Legends of Aviation Awards. Yeah, so reportedly it was...
Is he a legend of aviation?
Well, reportedly it was John Travolta who was pushing for this. The Grease star, remember that famous photograph of him dancing with Princess Diana at the White House in the 1980s? And it's thought that the two of them do have a pretty close friendship. He is part of this Living Legends of Aviation Hall of Fame. Prince Harry did served 2 tours of Afghanistan. He is a helicopter pilot. He's obviously done a lot of work for the military when it comes to the Invictus Games, military veterans, and of course countless training missions as well. Some people are perhaps saying, why is it that a Prince of the Realm is in the same category as somebody such as Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon? And lots of people are saying, does he actually deserve this award? Clearly, the judges in this case do believe that because he was at the award ceremony last night.
I mean, he is an aviator. He's done his bit, but so have hundreds of other military helicopter pilots and things. Just extraordinary being a legend of aviation.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. We've got the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos is also in this Hall of Fame, as well as a number of other.
Edge of space, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and Prince Harry flew helicopters. So I think a lot of people are saying that it's now perhaps. It's making the Living Legends of Aviation Awards not as perhaps prestigious as it was, but obviously they believe so, so we'll have to wait and see what the fallout is.
Not us all talking about it.
Yeah.
You would have heard of it otherwise, I suppose.
No. He seems to just get awards for being Prince Harry, doesn't he?
He looks very dapper in his tuxedo last night when he was arriving, so we'll see if we can get some photos of that next hour.
OK, Cameron, thanks very much indeed.
Right, shall we find out more about this storm, Isha, with Annie Shuttleworth?
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east, as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
Oh, joy.
I know.
Honestly, just
we
never
keep being told to
stops
brace
at the minute.
ourselves all the time, don't we?
Fed up with it now.
I know.
Roll on spring.
Oh, at least.
That's what I say. Now, there's been a huge surge in visits to the NHS website's page on prostate enlargement. Wonder why that is.
It is the Charles effect.
I'll tell you more in a minute.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:27, good morning to you. Now, we've been talking about this over the last few days, and good old King Charles, actually, is done us fellas a favour, because the announcement that he's going to have an operation to treat an enlarged prostate, something that most men don't like to talk about, prostate, do they? But anyway, it's led to a huge rise in searches for information about the condition.
Yes, they're already calling it the King Charles effect, and it could be a lifesaver. Yeah. One person visited the NHS website's page on prostate enlargement every 5 seconds. One person every 5 seconds on Wednesday after the royal announcement. That's 11 times more than usual.
Let's talk to GP Dr Lawrence Gurlis, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. What do you make of this, then? Because, I mean, it affects issues with the prostate, whether enlarged or a cancer problem, affects so many men, and yet we still don't like to talk about it.
Yes, men aren't very good at going to the doctor, and they're not very good about talking about their private parts, but I'm delighted that people are taking an interest. I check my PSA level every year, and I advise all of my patients to do that as well. And we do pick up prostate cancers, 6 or 7 a year. The good news is I haven't lost a patient. No one has died of prostate cancer in our practice for a very long time. And it is a manageable cancer, but it does need diagnosing and treating. Now, you also can get a raised PSA just if the gland is enlarged, or indeed if the gland is infected. So the results of a PSA blood test have to be interpreted with some caution. But I'm glad people are taking an interest, and I hope more men get tested.
I know that the Buckingham Palace has gone to the trouble of telling us that it is not cancer. It is an enlarged prostate, and the King is going in for this procedure next week. What's the difference, first of all, between an enlarged prostate and something that may involve cancer? And then what sort of treatment will the King expect to face?
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, we used to do a lot of surgery on enlarged prostates because there weren't medications available. Now there are very good medications that can shrink the size of the gland, that can improve the flow through the urethra. And very few people need this TUR, transurethral resection, which is in effect a rebore of the prostate gland. Now, I'm interested that's what the King is having, and I don't wish to cast any doubt on the statement that's come out. But you can have an enlarged gland without there being a malignant focus within it. He would have had a 3D MRI scan. There are fantastic scans you can have of the gland. Also, a prostate biopsy where 12 needles are put into the gland to look for cancers. So he's had a lot of investigations, and I understand the surgery is going to take place this week. But it's an unfortunate side of getting older. As our testosterone level drops, parts of a man's body change. I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of old men have quite large ears. And I think growth factors cause the gland, the prostate gland, to swell and then make it harder to pass urine in that way.
You keep talking about the PSA test, which is a blood test. It is not without some criticism, the PSA. And obviously a lot of people still have a physical check. Without going into too much detail...
That's what the men don't want to hear, isn't it?
That's what the men worry about. How do you put our minds at rest over that?
Well, the PSA, as I said before, just because it's increased doesn't necessarily mean cancer or enlargement. The physical examination adds a little bit extra. But nowadays, because of the advance of the 3D MRI scans, that really has taken the place of any physical examination. So you don't have to worry about what one of my patients called the doctor putting on the marigold gloves. that a combination of 3D MRI and PSA tests, and there are also urine tests that can be done to pick up factors from a malignant gland. So you shouldn't worry about seeing a doctor and having an invasive examination. There are alternatives to that at the moment.
And if it's already in your family, if there's a man in the family who has had prostate problems, isn't it more likely that any sons or male relatives could be more likely to get something at some stage? And should they be going to their GP now and asking for this PSA test or something?
Exactly, Anne. Certainly there is a genetic factor. It's the same gene that affects certain women, as you will know about that with breast cancer as well. It's the same gene. Also, men of an ethnic minority, particularly Afro-Caribbean men, have a higher incidence of prostate cancer, so they really should be prioritised. But yes, if you have a family history of prostate cancer, you should get checked out.
OK. Dr. Gurlis, great to see you.
Yeah,
thank you very much indeed. And if you are worried, concerned about that, or you just never had a check and you think you should...
You think you should, yeah.
Just get on with it. Just get on with it. You've got to grit your teeth and just go and get it done.
Yeah, well, us women have been poked and prodded in various places for all ways. So, and hopefully it may just come, as Dr. Gurlis said there, just to a PSA test or an MRI scan or something.
Yeah, but even if it doesn't...
Even if it doesn't, yes, it could save you.
Do you know what? They've seen it all before.
Yeah.
You've just...
And it's nothing.
You just got to get on with it. I mean, it's not a pleasant thought, is it? But you've just got to get on with it.
Well, don't think about it too much, just go for it.
No, just go. It can't be any worse than a smear test, can it?
No,
women
God,
have that.
no. I wish they'd call it something else as well. It's a dreadful name.
You think of something nice,
I will think of something nice, yes. Yeah. It's just dreadful. Dreadful name.
It's not good, is it? Never thought of it like that, but there you go. Aidan McGee's got the sport. Good morning.
Good morning to you both again.
Desperately trying to change tack there.
Desperately. Good news, though, for Cameron Norrie. He's holding his own down under. He lost the second set, which was a bit rough on him, but he's just broken back in the third. I believe it's 4-3 now to him, but there may have been a development since I've been listening to you talking about medical-related issues sitting on this bench. But look, he's the last remaining British interest down under. We lost Emma Raducanu, of course. We've got Carlos Alcaraz in action later today. And look, he made his breakthrough, 18 months ago, didn't he, at Wimbledon? He steadily kind of climbed the ranks and then dropped down again. But that would be a significant win if he could get that over the line against Casper Ruud, the world number 11, twice French Open champion. And it would be great to see, in the men's side, we just haven't seen much progress in the last few years. Since Andy Murray kind of left the top level of the sport and just started competing in the lower ranks.
It'd be nice to have a bit of a boost in the Australian Open.
It would, yeah.
Good for us
the heat's been affecting players as well. We saw the heat affect Emma Raducanu. Jack Draper as well was also very unwell on court, and that just shows the searing heat down there. You wonder
it's an oven, isn't it? That stadium.
They don't seem to be able to manage it either. I remember watching Nadal against Djokovic in 2012, and they went to something like 6 hours, I think it was, in sweltering heat. It was well over 40 degrees, and I wondered how on earth they were doing it. And I wondered if they might make it more temperate. I mean, by putting it under a roof or something like that. But there's just no way of handling it. There's no way of handling it. It's very, very difficult. We'll keep you updated, of course.
But it's in the evening. No, isn't it?
It is in the evening, yeah. Sometimes they play until the early hours of the mornings, obviously. They're not going to do a Wimbledon this year because of objections from local residents. But that's helped it slightly. But goodness me, there's still lots of matches going on in the daytime, and it's a real physical battle. I suppose you could say, well, it's part of the endurance test.
I don't know. Within my lifetime, you just sort of think that Brits and tennis have not been a very good match, I just don't think.
I never thought I'd see.
We saw Andy Murray obviously had his couple of wins at Wimbledon, but I don't know. But at least we're good at darts.
We are indeed. Well, one person certainly is, Luke Littler. He's 17 tomorrow, and he backed up his... I know, yeah. He backed up his world championship final appearance on January the 3rd by winning the Bahrain Masters. And what a birthday present, £20,000 to add to the £200,000 he earned for finishing runner-up. And what a breakthrough. We were wondering whether he could back it up. Boris Becker backed it up, didn't he, back in 85 by winning Wimbledon in 86. Emma Raducanu disappeared for 2.5 years, as we've discussed earlier on this morning.
But Luke's on a roll. He's on a roll.
He is, exactly.
Yeah, and he obviously didn't let his defeat get him down.
No, exactly.
He went straight into the next
thing. Yeah, because also in that final, we mentioned it earlier on, didn't we, that there was a pivotal moment where, I mean, I think he should have won that final, actually, but there's a pivotal moment where he just lost it, and you wonder what that does to the young sporting mind psychologically when that happens. But, look, he's got straight back involved. He's enrolled for the Premier League, which a lot of people said he shouldn't really do because he hasn't done enough in the sport. I think that's pretty ridiculous.
He has.
But absolutely. He's going to the Dutch Masters later in the month, and the Premier League starts early February. He could be a millionaire by the summer if he keeps winning.
Yeah, he could be.
Bless him.
I know.
He could be. But I like the fact that when you hear him being interviewed, he's a sensible lad. Actually,
he is, but
and that's really nice.
He's got a nice little bit of arrogance about him as well. He goes into these tournaments. No. Well, yeah, you need it at top level sport.
Well, yeah,
you really do.
You've got to believe in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nobody else will.
Yeah, true. Well, I don't know. We all do. Go for you, Luke. Aidan, thank you very much.
Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you.
Do stick with us because we're going to be tackling this story. Was a school in North London right to ban pupils from praying? We'll be discussing that and more in our paper review next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At 8:41, it's time to go through some of the papers today with the Deputy Editor of Spiked, Fraser Myers, And, oh, no, it says deputy editor of the Spectator. Are you assistant editor?
Assistant editor.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Can I say, sounds much more sophisticated.
Oh, thank you very
So
much.
you better learn that, Fraser. Cindy, you, good to see you both this morning. Fraser, this has actually been... this was around
This
on
has been
Thursday.
rumbling around for days, hasn't
But
it?
Catherine Burble-Singh, who's this very, very strict but gets good results head teacher, she wants the school to be non-religious.
Yeah, she's often dubbed Britain's strictest head teacher.
Yeah.
She runs a really great school in North London, in Wembley. It's a very poor, deprived area. All of the pupils are from, huge variety of ethnic minority backgrounds. But they get absolutely phenomenal results. Some of the best improvements in GCSEs and things like that from... But there's now a row rumbling at the moment because essentially the school has instituted a ban on prayer rituals and it's being sued over it. It's currently a case, it's going through the High Court. Now, this started at some point last year. A young Muslim girl started praying in the playground, using her blazer to pray, and then it quickly grew and grew and grew, and other Muslim pupils started joining these rituals. And then other sort of religious influences started growing in the school. So there were girls reporting that they were pressured into wearing the hijab. A girl was decided to stop going to choir because she was told by her fellow pupils that it was haram to be a part of the choir during Ramadan. So they realised that, one of the key things about the school is that, everyone is treated the same. They all sit together in meals. They don't really have free time. Even in break time, it's supervised. They're only allowed to have a maximum of 4 people in a group, so people don't get left out.
There's no talking in the corridors.
There's no talking in the corridors, and everyone also eats the same meals at lunchtime, again, so that everyone is treated the same. There's no differences, so that people don't sort themselves into the kind of groupings that they might do in the outside world. And it works. It creates a genuine sense of cohesion. But this lawsuit is challenging that effectively.
She's going to lose it, though, isn't she?
I think she might do, yeah. I mean, the government's advice on this is really confused. Part of it basically says that schools don't have an obligation to provide prayer rooms, but it also says that you have to respect the right to pray and respect that part of the Islamic religion. So basically, this is a bit of a landmark case. It's a bit of a landmark case. I think we don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but it does. I mean, given that the school allows children to wear hijabs, there are certain levels of religious markings that are already allowed. So where do you draw the line between that and prayer mats, that and designated prayer time? I think it's a difficult case, to be sure.
Yeah. One thing it's important to stress, though, is that although, obviously the people involved in the case are presenting this as an Islamic requirement, it isn't, frankly. And in Turkey and Pakistan, schools do not have breaks for prayer. This is actually, quite a hard line demand. In Islam, you can actually, you're allowed to take prayers later on if you miss them during the day. People have, busy lives. Slightly different during Ramadan. Obviously, that has to be respected. But so I think what is interesting is that there is almost like an Islamist campaign to differentiate Muslims or to impose...
or to disrupt her common sense attitude.
And to disrupt, what is, The other thing is that she has, denied religious requests to other religions. So, there are revision classes, on Sunday, even though that upsets the Christians. Hindus have been asked to ensure that, certain eggs don't touch their meals and things like that. They've been denied that request. An interesting one, Jehovah's Witnesses have requested that kids don't study Macbeth because they're not allowed to learn about texts that feature magic. She's denied them that right. So this is not she is not, waging an anti-Islamic campaign. She is enforcing strict secular rules that everyone should abide by. Well, look, parents know that this is what the school is.
Well, and the bottom line is, and I went to a church school, and I would, if I had children, I would send them to a church school. But nevertheless, she's getting results, and you can't argue with that.
And she's getting results because of her... this is essentially a massive social experiment, and she knows, she's very thoughtful about it, and she's doing this integrating stuff
Why would somebody want to disrupt that? And is it the pupils who are is it coming organically from the pupils, or is it being organised from home?
I think almost certainly there must be a degree of adult influence.
Yeah.
I mean, children don't know how to deal
And
with
isn't it
courts.
the case that £100,000 have been raised in legal aid against the school? So there is some kind of crowdfunder going on.
And there
Why
is
disrupt something that's working?
But there is a broader animosity to this school as well. I think people on the Liberal left really hate this school. They hate Catherine Birbalsingh because she's a quite proud Conservative, but also because the school shows up a lot of Liberal left shibboleths. It shows that actually, racial identity politics is bad. We shouldn't treat working class people or black people or Muslim people with the bigotry of low expectations. If you have high standards for everyone, make people work hard, then they will do well.
Yeah, well, which is the bottom line, I think. Interesting one in the Express this morning, Cindy, because I wondered what they were going to do with HS2 stuff that they've knocked the houses down and all the rest of it.
And they've spent £600 million buying all this land that they're not going to use for HS2. So campaigners are calling for a nature superhighway to be running across that. And some parts of it are quite narrow, but some parts of it are really broad. So what we could have is a very exciting cross-country nature park, basically. And biodiversity in the UK the UK actually has one of the worst biodiversity environments in the developed world.
It would be great, and it could be a tourist attraction.
Exactly. And a good way to make a success out of it, because otherwise they would have to flog off this land at lower prices, so they'd be making a loss in any case. But that requires this government making some kind of shrewd decision, and so I'm not sure that it will succeed. But I think it's such a lovely idea to turn this kind of wastage into something good.
Almost turns it into a sort of national park.
Exactly.
Doesn't it, again? Yes, which, we could go to. We'd love to go for a few days and walk along it.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
That sort of thing. I'd do it.
Although I can't help but feel that building the actual train line would have been better for the environment in the long run.
Yeah.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, the questions remain over if Labour government come in later this year. Are they going to revive this? So again, we're back into the dithering, will they, won't they?
Well, that's right. And this is what this year is going to be like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing's going to get decided until we know.
No. Interesting one in The Guardian, because there's all the heat on Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry. There's a Scottish sort of COVID inquiry going on as well. Nicola Sturgeon has apparently deleted her WhatsApp messages.
Nicola Sturgeon doesn't have a single WhatsApp message from her time during the pandemic, and funnily enough, nor do many members of her top team.
That's
very mysterious. And what's interesting is that Nicola Sturgeon, when she announced Scotland's COVID inquiry to great fanfare, she didn't need to, by the way, because Scotland's decisions are also scrutinised in the main UK COVID inquiry. She did it just as a sort of grandstanding thing. She said she wanted to be extra transparent. I'm more transparent than the Tory government. And now she's been shown... I mean, everyone knows that, there's something not right here. If she had auto-deleted messages... which is possible, and some people have, then she would have surely known that at the time that she announced the inquiry.
So I think what happened, probably the Matt Hancock diaries, all the WhatsApps flying around with Simon Case, the other senior civil servants, with senior health officials, showed her, God, if my WhatsApps come out too, and the inquiry has the power to do this.
On the one hand, you don't blame her, because how ridiculous was it that WhatsApp should have been private, and suddenly it gets exposed and...
I think the problem is this governing by WhatsApp. A lot of the things that would have in a previous generation been done via email, like traceable options in work email inboxes, are now over WhatsApp. So that mixes the personal with the professional.
According to techie experts, even if you delete them on your phone, there is software that can revive them and bring them back.
Well, there we go. Maybe we'll see Nicola Sturgeon's messages after all.
I do feel a bit sorry for the politicians who, whose WhatsApps are being exposed, because they did have a genuine belief that what they were saying was in private, and you do have to have sort of private channels of communication, or at least to be able to if in a cabinet room to be able to discuss things, to test ideas, to say things that are not necessarily going to be the final policy, the final announcement. I think that's reasonable, but I think it's the hypocrisy with Sturgeon that grates. She was so hard on everyone, and the SNP and their supporters were so hard on Boris Johnson for not having every single one of his WhatsApps available to the inquiry, but they're not going to be able to deliver any of them.
And Scotland has, had flaws during its pandemic response. The care homes, they had unclear instructions what to do with those who are positive, go into hospital or don't go into hospital. They were 8 hours away from a total PPE outage at one point.
Gosh.
So these are the questions that need to be answered.
Yes.
But can't really.
None of the right questions are being asked.
Per capita, more people died in Scotland and in Wales, despite the fact that Nicola Sturgeon poses as Mrs. Lockdown, believing that she saved more lives. It's not the case at all.
Can we move on to this amazing story about what's happened in a forest in Devon? Because we were talking about it at 6 o'clock this morning. We've never actually got round to it. Cindy, tell us what's happened.
Yeah. So these giant tortoises are actually from the Seychelles. So the fact that they've ended up in the forest in Devon, sadly not alive, dead, 7 of them found dead. By the
7, is it?
Yeah, 7 of them found dead.
And they're like these the huge giant tortoises, like the ones we usually see on Galapagos.
Yes, I don't think it's quite that species, but they are still vulnerable species themselves. And they cost around £10,000 per tortoise. So it is possible to own them. There are very legitimate ways to own them. But clearly not clearly actually, what we don't know what's happening is that 7 of them have been discovered far from where they were born, dead, clearly left there. So the question is, was it a smuggling gang? Was it an owner who was unscrupulous and couldn't afford the upkeep? Because they do need to be kept very, very warm.
Yeah.
And so the RSPCA is looking into that, and there's a police investigation going on as well.
It needs to be. It's a disgrace.
It is.
Yeah, well, clearly, because, given the speed they moved, they didn't make their own way to Devon.
No, exactly. And they couldn't have escaped either, so they were definitely
They must have been smuggled, mustn't they?
Smuggled and then dumped.
It was maybe they died and the smugglers just had to get rid of them.
Yeah, and they were quite young as well, so so it could also have been like an owner thinking that they could look after these animals, but actually after a cold winter, the upkeep was very expensive, so instead of doing anything about it, like donating them or, rehoming them.
Mind you, it's also very stupid because even if they died innocently, how that works out, I don't know, but the shells and everything would be worth a fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, if only for posterity.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never advocate sort of farming or killing for the shells.
Yeah.
But if something dies naturally...
Yeah. So it does feel like there's foul play going on.
But it's so tragic. At the end of the day, they are incredibly exotic, amazing animals. And they shouldn't have been treated so
badly. They live for
badly.
over 100 years, usually, if they were kept in the right conditions. I don't think this is the same species, but one of Charles Darwin's tortoises from the Galapagos, Harriet, was owned by Charles Darwin and later by Steve Irwin.
Really?
The same
tortoise, yeah. Over 100 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how long they live, yeah.
It's phenomenal, isn't it? All these animals need to be treated with respect.
And such a shock that apparently it was discovered by just a passerby, somebody who was out walking on a very frosty morning, I presume, and came across what they realised then were these giant
And there's some quite
tortoises.
horrible pictures of the corpses as well, so you can't imagine that,
Not pleasant experience, Look, Cindy, Fraser, it's been great to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Loads of you getting in touch about the pets law as well. I was talking about animals. The government's now looking at changing it so that to steal a pet is a criminal activity, which it isn't at the moment.
Yeah, it's not just a belonging. It is now
crazy,
a very important member of the family, frankly.
Here's your weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 20th of January. Today, 4 bodies, including a man, his 2 young girls and a woman from the same family, are discovered in a property near Norwich.
The government grants 16,000 asylum seekers the right to work in areas such as care, construction and farming under a Home Office scheme.
Prince Harry faces a £750,000 legal bill after withdrawing his libel case against the publisher of The Mail on Sunday. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker will tell us more.
Yeah, and all of that overshadowing his appearance at the Aviation Awards in Los Angeles last night. Meanwhile, his spokesperson hits out over his litigation against the Mail. Find out more shortly.
The government backs proposals to make cat and dog thefts a criminal offence in England and Northern Ireland.
And could you manage without your mobile today? Well, perhaps it's time to put it to the test. It is officially No Phones at Home Day.
Our children now, if they're on a trajectory to live till the age of 90, they will spend 25 years of their life looking at it.
Yes, good luck with that. Annie Shuttleworth has your weather.
Good morning. Storm Isha's on the way for Sunday, but what's in store for the weather today? Well, you can find out all the details with me a little bit later on.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Let's start with our main news straight away then, should we, this morning, because police have announced that 4 people from the same family have been found dead at a property near Norwich after officers forced their way into the house.
According to reports, the bodies of a 45-year-old man, 36-year-old woman and 2 girls were discovered inside, and all had injuries.
Well, the man and 2 children are understood to have lived at the address. Police say the woman didn't live there. She was just visiting.
Norfolk and Suffolk police forces have cordoned off the area whilst they conduct forensic tests.
Well, let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley, who's here. Peter, good to see you. You sort of wonder where the officers start with this, because I guess it's not just any evidence within the house, it's understanding the family dynamics, what was going on in their social circles and all the rest of it.
Yes, it's about 26 hours now since officers forced their way into the property, and there was a very brief statement from Detective Chief Inspector Burgess, the officer in charge of the inquiry, yesterday, and he told us essentially what the 2 of you have just alluded to, and very little else, although there was one key phrase within his words, and that was that they believe this is an isolated incident. So it's not one of those fast-moving kind of cases where the police might be making an appeal for public assistance with somebody who was wanted, for example. It's very much not that. And if it is indeed isolated, then it may be that the beginning, the middle and the end of this inquiry could all be contained within that property.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Does an isolated incident mean this is contained? In other words, there's nobody... We don't have to warn the public that there could be anyone around who could present a danger.
It could well mean that, and had it been a very different set of circumstances, we might have been seeing mugshots of wanted people and warnings issued to the public and asking for the public's assistance with any sightings. It's most definitely not one of those type of incidents, and something which, as crime scenes so often give up their secrets, if indeed this is a crime scene, I'm sure that in the not-too-distant future, the full horrors of what went on will be made public.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to imagine, even if the police, though, have, which it sounds like they do have an idea as to what went on, it's about evidence, isn't it, now?
Oh, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. We've already seen the forensic tents being put up outside, small kind of cordons established around the house, because what we need to remember is that, say, for example, and I'm hypothesising now, but say if there is nobody else involved in this incident, there will, of course, be coroner's inquests into how these people died. And the evidence gathering is every bit as important in those circumstances as it would be with a kind of killing whereby if somebody could be on the run, for example. It's absolutely crucial that the full picture is painted in order that evidence can be given to a coroner's inquiry, which will happen whether or not there is any other outside involvement, so that the truth can be established, not trying to prove a set of circumstances, but telling the irrefutable truth. therefore so that correct verdicts can be delivered, and in some kind of form an element of justice is obtained for so many people whose lives will have been shattered by these events.
Absolutely, not least the community as well. It's so shocking to hear that something like that has happened where you live. But there's digital evidence as well, isn't there? We all sort of carry around or leave a digital footprint behind, don't we? We're wearing smart watches, or we've all got mobile phones that can show where we've been and when we last sent a message to somebody and what it said.
And can count your steps and map a route and
even
so much more.
Tell when your heart was beating and not.
Indeed, indeed. And these are very much the 21st century tools that a detective can rely upon these days. Essentially, most major inquiries are solved through CCTV, phone and tech data, and of course forensic science, which is unrecognisable from what it was back in the day when I was a detective.
Yeah, and there's ring doorbells. You see a lot of evidence from those, don't we now?
All of this data is so important, and you hear people, particularly like the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, I know this isn't in London, but he's saying how he's driving forward data-driven policing. And we saw that this week when we saw images of robbers stealing phones. What had happened is that the police had analysed all those crimes, where they were happening, when they were happening, so they were able to deploy undercover operatives at the time when those crimes were most likely to occur.
Can you, just a final thought, Peter, can you, when it comes to some of this data, the tech data, is it treated as irrefutable or can it be questioned?
Oh, I'm sure there will be many a mind that will pore over it, particularly defence barristers when it goes to court. And we've had this before. In fact, rather tragically, some years ago, there was a case in Liverpool, the tragic murder of a woman called Lucy Hargreaves, a 23-year-old mother of 3 young children who was shot dead in her home in 2005. Now, the CPS built a case, early days of triangulation evidence, trying to prove that a phone was in a particular place in the possession of a particular person when they did some acts preparatory to committing the crime. Of course, the defence pored over this, as they will do now, because as much as the tech improves, the defence are going to question it, and when they find that slightest element of doubt, then, of course, they will highlight that to a jury.
OK, Peter, got to leave it there. Really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Now to another subject that's getting you really riled up at home. It has done all morning. It's the fact that nearly 16,000 Channel migrants living in Britain now have been given the right to work. That's according to data that had to be obtained under the Freedom of Information Law.
Yeah, now there are some sort of caveats to it all. They're only paid 80% of the going rate, only in sectors facing severe staff shortages, but that includes care homes and the like, construction and agriculture.
They do apparently lose their £49 a week subsistence allowance, and it is required of them to contribute towards their accommodation costs.
Let's speak to former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, who is here. At a time of desperately trying to save money and cutting costs and all that sort of thing, David, is there not an element of sense to this if people are contributing to their own costs while they're here in the UK awaiting a decision?
Yes. Now, most politicians could never answer a question with one word.
No.
But the answer is yes. However, it's all bound up with a lot of other stuff that don't make this government look too good. For instance, a total failure to level with the public that this was happening. I mean, what did they think? Did they think people weren't going to notice this?
I mean, we've been talking about this issue, Channel migrants, for instance, for years.
Of course.
And particularly in the last, in the last year, and yet nobody has stood up and said, actually, we do put some, if they've been here a year or longer, we will allow them to work. Nobody's ever volunteered.
And at one level, it isn't a bad idea, because here we are, short of staff for a whole lot of key jobs because of the impact of Brexit and so on, which I'm not saying was a bad thing, but it meant a lot of people who would normally come and work here didn't. But it's also the fact that there's a failure to level with the public about the prospects of actually ever getting rid of these people that turn up on our beaches. And the answer is the government hasn't got a chance of stopping this. And so they have got to try to find a way through it. And the worrying thing, of course, is that if the public loses confidence in the integrity of politicians, in other words, they don't think politicians are dealing from a full deck. They don't trust the politicians. They wake up this morning and find the politicians have been allowing something to happen, which is directly contrary to government policy. Government policy is that no one should gain any advantage from turning up on our beaches or coming in some other illicit way. And yet people will now think, well, if these people show up, they might get a job. This is a mess.
Which is, I mean, there is a big argument about incentive in all of this, people coming here, but also, and I have to say, it's the human element in this as well. Lee's been in touch because obviously care homes are one of the areas.
Yeah.
I do not want my 97-year-old father in his care home being looked after by an unknown person. These people can completely fabricate their past. There is also a language barrier.
Of course.
It's very hard to ignore a comment like that.
No, I mean, and of course, if they are trying to ignore it, that is totally bad. Look, it seems to me, you know, and I was a Home Office Minister for 5 years, fortunately not having to deal with immigration, but I can tell you that the government's got to level with the public. And also, it would be no bad thing, actually, if there was some cross-party discussions about this, because this is not a partisan matter, or oughtn't to be. These people will show up whether there's a Labour government, Conservative government, whatever other government we invent. But the reality is that the public are getting sick of being lied to by politicians. For the last 20 years, politicians have, longer, but let's just say for the last 20 years, have lied to the public by making out that if the right people were in control of government, it would be easy to stop these people. Well, it isn't. And therefore, a serious effort has got to be made to answer a very difficult question. Can these people ever be stopped? If they can't be stopped, what's the point in trying? What is the point? The other things will have to be deployed.
What do you think? Can they ever be stopped?
I
mean, is there a solution to this problem?
I don't think so.
But
I feel like, what was it?
Well, you say that, though, but you can't then you can't have the attitude, can you, to say, just let it happen?
Well, but sometimes people have got to be realistic with the public. You know, it's like Hilaire Belloc's doctors, isn't it? They answered as they took their fees, there is no cure for this disease. And there slightly isn't. But where we have got to at the moment is with the politicians not playing fair with the public. Other people come in and say, we're politicians who will play fair with the public. So other parties arise, and the whole thing becomes pretty chaotic. But look, as far as I'm concerned, and by the way, I said this right from the start, I remember saying years ago, there is no prospect of dealing with this issue unless you keep the lawyers out of it, and unless you say, and you do whatever you have to do with the European Court of Human Rights or whatever. If someone turns up on a beach somewhere uninvited, why should they have a right to free legal advice, however it's dressed up? Why should they have a right to go before the British courts?
But you deny them legal advice, free legal advice.
Of course.
And another lawyer will step in and defend their right to get free legal advice.
Of course, but that would have to be... It's a racket.
Yeah.
It's a good one for
everyone
lawyers.
Watching this programme, we can all at least agree on one thing. This is a racket. And the people who do well out of it are the lawyers.
David, good to see you.
Reminds me of a line in Frasier.
All right, go
on. And you know that both brothers in Frasier are psychiatrists. One turns to the other, he says, I love lawyers, they make perfect patients. They have fantastic health insurance and they never get better.
Yes. On that note, at 9:14, let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom. And the Japanese Space Agency has made contact with its spacecraft after it successfully landed on the moon. Just the 5th country in the world to manage that, believe it or not, in all these years. It's called the Moon Sniper. There's an image for you on the screen. It landed pretty much on target, but not without problems. The solar array is not working properly, apparently, so it could only live for a few hours.
Tata Steel has confirmed up to 2,800 jobs will be affected by its plan to close furnaces at its Port Talbot site. The cuts will be made over the next 18 months as the company transitions to a greener way of working. However, the Unite union says it is ready to use everything in its armoury to protect staff and defend the industry.
As we're talking about in the paper review, 7 giant Aldabra tortoises have been found dead in a forest in Devon. Inquiries underway to identify the owners and establish the circumstances that led to the animals dying and being dumped in the forest. They can live for up to 150 years, and alongside their Galapagos cousins, are the largest species of tortoise in the world.
9:15, time to talk Prince Harry. Some royal news now. Well, apparently the Duke of Sussex has attended an awards ceremony in Los Angeles where a few hours ago he was inducted. Oh,
that's a Freudian slip,
that is a Freudian
isn't it?
slip. He was inducted into the Living Legends of Aviation for his work as a British Army veteran and pilot. Here he is accepting the award.
Gentlemen, please welcome living legend, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex.
Gosh, what do you think of that?
Well, the living legend is now facing a very nearly £1 million bill after dropping legal action against the publishers of the Mail on Sunday. Let's talk to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, living legend of GB News, no question. Can we just talk about that award, just because...
Yeah, of course.
Because what's going on? Living legend...
So you saw John Travolta there giving him the medal, the Living Legends of Aviation Awards. Prince Harry has now been inducted into the same Hall of Fame as Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, a number of other Hollywood celebrities. There's a few military pilots who are a bit upset that Prince Harry's got the award. He did serve 2 tours of Afghanistan. He is a helicopter pilot, but the argument they're making is it's nothing that lots of other military pilots haven't done, and yet he has been inducted into this Hall of Fame. He actually made a speech on being accepted the award. We don't have a clip of it, but I can quote what he said. He said to John Travolta, Prince Harry did, "I was just 1 year old when you danced with my mum at the White House." And look at us now, of course, there's that famous photograph of John Travolta and Princess Diana dancing at the White House. So it was a nice occasion for Prince Harry. Meghan was meant to be there. She wasn't there. According to the Press Association, it's because one of their children is a bit under the weather, so that's why. But of course, it's all being...
She wasn't being inducted as anything.
Well, you can perhaps speculate. Apparently not. But of course, it's all been completely overshadowed by the fact he's pulled out of this legal action against the Mail.
Yes, and you wonder how he's going to afford the bill, because if it comes up to about £750,000, that is a lot of money, even to him.
It is. So that's £250,000 reportedly of the Mail's legal costs, plus 500 grand of his own legal costs. Now, a spokesperson for Prince Harry did say it's way too early to speculate as to the figure, the amount of money that he's going to have to pay, but I think there's certainly no denial that it's going to be, as you said, Anne, a pretty hefty legal bill.
Well, the fact they didn't turn around and say, oh, it's going to be nowhere near that much.
Means
it means it probably is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the problem for Prince Harry is he was banking on the fact it was a done deal and the judge would just give him a summary judgment, doesn't need to go to trial. They libelled him, therefore they have to pay out money. The judge disagreed with that. He thought that the Mail's honest opinion defence could well win at trial, and that is why yesterday papers were due to be filed on both sides, Prince Harry's lawyers and the Mail on Sunday's lawyers, but Prince Harry decided to pull out completely, so those papers weren't submitted to the court and it didn't go to trial.
I mean, he's been always talking, both of them have talked a lot about mental health and how to look after yourself and all the rest of it. And they went to the States to get away from the scrutiny of the British press. But, I mean, his life is full of legal cases at the moment. And you wonder about the stress he's placing himself and his family.
Yeah, it is anguish. I think he's got a lot of anger in him. I think that's clear to see, because he is involved in, well, 5 litigation cases, separate cases over the last few years. The spokesperson for Prince Harry last night told me that his priority is very much for safety of his family, and he doesn't want to keep giving a platform to what the spokesperson describes as the Mail's false narrative, essentially. Of course, the Mail's always denied the allegations against him, but it's a tricky situation. He's still suing the Home Office over his security arrangements as well.
Is he being chivied on, do we think?
Well, lawyers can make a lot of money, as we all know. I think Prince Harry, well, he does see it as his life's mission to really take on the British tabloids and the culture of the British media and the way they operate. So it was a success for him in November when he won his case, or partly won his case, against Mirror Group newspapers over unlawful information gathering. The judge found that there was substantial phone hacking in that case. Prince Harry's still got 2 other separate litigation against the publisher of The Sun and the publisher of The Mail over alleged unlawful information gathering. Both those newspaper groups deny all the allegations made against them, and of course the Home Office. So he hasn't lost a battle. He's given up on this battle in terms of libel cases, but there's still a lot more battles to come.
It's a lot more stress, I think, for him.
Yeah.
OK, Cameron, thanks very much indeed.
One just hopes that he would learn to go to California and live the life, have a lovely life with his beautiful family. But he just is so caught up with, I don't know, bitterness.
It is bitterness, isn't it?
That's
I wonder
what it
if,
feels
and I
like.
just wonder if someone's
It's
encouraged.
not good for you.
Someone's encouraged the bitterness.
Who do
I
you
don't
think?
know. That might be a bit of an assumption.
Mm.
I don't know, but really, someone looking after him really should be saying, "Do you know what, Harry? Forget about it.
Yeah, just
let
learn to
it
live
go.
your life.
Let it go, and let's move on with a new chapter." Instead, it seems to be get your own back, Harry.
Yeah.
Which won't be doing him any good.
No, it won't.
actually.
No.
Oh dear, there you go. Oh, maybe I should be a psychologist.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think common sense would.
Well, common
anyone with
sense.
common sense would tell Harry that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's what it is, really. OK, if you've got a bit of common sense, you want to sort of batten down the hatches a little bit this weekend because the
Brace
weather
yourself.
is terrible. Let's get the details from Annie.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
Well, as we said, batten down the hatches, brace yourself. Storm Isha will do her worst.
We have a live docking in orbit.
Space.
There you go. Oh, look at that. Look how blue it looks. It's because
it's a bit bright blue for space.
It's because it's looking down, and that's the ocean beneath.
Now, what is it we're looking at?
This is the Axiom 3 mission, which is a Dragon capsule, so that's SpaceX. Axiom, it's a Texas, because it's another private thing. It's a Texas company, but it's all about a European mission. Oh, there's one of the astronauts. But it's a European mission, which is.
They're going to put a laboratory.
A sort of it's a lab. They're doing all these tests. It's the first all-European commercial astronaut mission.
And it will dock with the International Space Station.
Yes, the ISS. So that docking should be happening imminently. You see, we can see the craft there, so it's pretty close to the ISS.
It's
but
obviously in a very low orbit, isn't it?
No.
Well, with the fact that you can see the Earth beneath it.
Yeah, but
does that mean?
No. Well, I mean, in some respects, it's not that high, is it? What's the ISS? About 210 miles up, something like that. It's not a huge. It's not a huge distance in the great scheme of things.
But it just shows how private everything's going. I mean,
cheaper, you see.
Yes, the rocket is the SpaceX.
It's a Dragon capsule.
The mission team with their laboratory is Axiom,
which I think is Texan.
Yeah.
And then
and NASA is behind it all as well.
Yeah, and then you've got Europeans on them actually doing the mission.
And then you had the Japanese landing on the moon yesterday. It's quite strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of space going on at the moment.
There is a lot, which is good. Anyway, the crew are going to be up there for about 14 days, apparently, testing microgravity on various bits and bobs, because it's not zero gravity up there, it's microgravity.
There you are, you see, low orbit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, a high orbit's like 120,000 miles. That's what it's the satellites and things.
Yeah.
Like, they're that high, they're that far up. It's ridiculous. It's a long way. Anyway, no good me waffling on. We'll talk to Andy Lound a little bit later on in the programme about that and also about the Japan mission and a bit of this as well.
And all about the King Charles effect as well. Obviously, the Buckingham Palace have been very open about the fact that he has a prostate problem, an enlarged prostate, and that's caused a surge of inquiries, which is a good thing from men wondering if they should get a check-up in some way. We'll be finding out more in a couple of moments.
Oh, you haven't gone yet. There you go. I'm just looking at images from SpaceX, actually, which is not showing us any live pictures at the moment, so we can't show you them on screen. Just the astronauts preparing to blast off, which
looks a lot like Tom Hanks.
Oh well, there you go. It could well be Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks has got that exhibition underway in London at the minute called Moonwalkers, which
sounds brilliant.
My parents went over Christmas, and it's incredible. It's incredible, so that's worth checking out. Anyway, more on the space, more on the Charles effect in just a moment.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for diversity to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
We're upsetting people again.
Oh, what have we said now?
This is from Diane, who says, watching your snarky comments this morning demonstrates your undercurrent hatred.
Of?
Well, just general undercurrent hatred, I think. But it's about Prince Harry. If people like you left him alone, he'd be able to enjoy the California lifestyle he left the UK for. Do you know, I don't only pay attention to critical comments necessarily, but I can tell you, we don't have an undercurrent of hatred. I mean, like, we really don't. And it's not... It's almost a sense of feeling sorry for him, really, and it's when someone becomes their own worst enemy. And it's, you know, that's... I mean, I'm being totally upfront and honest with you, Diane. You know, I just think you have to... Sometimes you need to say to people, just step away, stop digging, go and live your life, rather than causing this problem. You're just not going to get any resolution.
I don't blame him wanting justice, and he's had a life feeling that he's been treated very, very badly by, particularly the press. But at some point, he ought to be able to see that he's hurting himself now.
It's like bitterness. It's like I was always taught, never become bitter. But my mother always taught me. She said, because the people, the only people who get hurt by being bitter are the people who are bitter.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely right. So I'm sorry you feel that way. Though you see, Diane's in Cape Town, and I do wonder if that's an international perspective on it. Might be different. But anyway, but I just needed to refute
Tell you what, I don't hate Prince Harry at all.
I don't hate anybody.
I want him to be happy. And he just doesn't strike you as happy at the moment.
No, he really doesn't. But anyway, let's tell you, some people might be unhappy. People who like playing an ancient Cornish beach game dating back to the 16th century because it's under threat because of health and safety.
Oh, no. It's Cornish hurling, and it's as much a part of Cornish life as clotted cream. But this year, the game has become embroiled in a tussle at the town council that could see it cancelled altogether.
I don't really know what it is. So let's find out with our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody.
They've been doing it for centuries, right across the duchy. It began as an ancient form of rugby, two teams vying for possession of a small silver ball. In St Ives, the festivity has evolved to include children who, every St Ives feast, get the day off school for some good old-fashioned rough and tumble.
At exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, all of the locals gather here in this churchyard. It has to be from consecrated ground, that's very important. And they throw a silver ball over the wall onto the beach below. But there's a problem. At 10 o'clock this year, it'll be high tide, which means they won't have access to the whole of the beach. Just these rocks here, and they're sharp.
St Ives Mayor Johnny Wells is concerned.
The problem is that we no longer have a beach where we used to have a beach. So this is the area where it used to be all lovely sandy all the way up to the wall. And then in 1996, we had a new lifeboat house built, and since then it's changed the way the water moves in the area, and we no longer have any sand on the beach, which we did used to have sand, and it's now just rocks, and it's quite big rocks as well, so it's not a beach anymore.
Beach or not, tradition is tradition. The Mayor has suggested changing the time of the game or the location. He's also suggested using a tangerine wrapped in foil instead of a hard silver ball. But he's coming up against opinions as intractable as the rocks themselves. Members of his own council insisting things stay as they always have been, and many in St Ives agree.
Keep it going. Let's keep it going. It's a shame, and you know, everybody knows the risks nowadays. Everyone says when you go to the coast and all that, be careful. And these people have been doing it for years, so they know the risks.
But there's a difference between knowing the risks and mitigating against them. Insurance is proving tricky this year. The Mayor believes, far from ruining the game, a change of venue to somewhere safer will help preserve it for generations to come.
You know, traditions need to evolve over time, otherwise they will die out, and that's just what we're trying to do here, is protect a tradition in St Ives and give it a new lease of life.
But a new lease of life and tradition are not natural bedfellows. The debate is getting heated, with accusations of nanny state and health and safety gone mad, lobbed with as much ferocity as the silver ball itself. And right now there's no answer. It's hoped the council will find a way to keep the game going, but with the event just weeks away, that's looking as certain as the weather. Jeff Moody, GB News.
What I don't understand with that is the Mayor is saying, well, it's now all stones here, where it used to be a beach. But when you look back at all that really old footage we've got, there's stones.
Then. But I must say, dancing around on those stones would produce a twisted ankle or two, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, maybe.
I don't know.
Well,
Why don't they just
on.
move it to a nearby beach where there's plenty of flat sand? I've never heard of that before.
But it's
I love traditions like that.
Get a
But
twisted ankle, well...
Broken ankle, not so funny.
Well, no, but it's not the end of the world, is it? I mean, kids will be kids.
Well, it's nice to keep a tradition alive, I must say, but I don't see why they can't go to a flatter part of the beach or something.
Just let them get on with it.
How extraordinary.
Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about the Charles effect, should we? We're all saying it's very odd when King Charles, beg your pardon, made the announcement that he's got an enlarged prostate and he's going to have some work on it in the hospital in the next week. It seemed extremely personal for him to release.
Yes,
we were told,
a lot of people said it was sharing too much information.
But we were told it's because he wanted to raise awareness. Well, it's had an impact.
A huge impact, apparently. One person visited the NHS website's page on prostate enlargement every 5 seconds on Wednesday after the royal revelation. So it has had an effect, because that's 11 times more than usual, and it's really important.
But it's still something we don't, you know, as men, we don't really like to talk about prostate. Don't really know quite why, really. It's just one of those things. But we know enlarged prostates can happen to an awful lot of people. Prostate cancer is on the rise as well.
Which we must stress.
The King hasn't got.
has not got, yes.
No.
But he has an enlarged prostate.
But anyway, let's talk to prostate cancer survivor Tim Kirby. Tim, it's really good to see you. First and foremost, on the sort of the idea of talking about it, it's becoming slightly easier, I guess, but it's still a sort of sensitive issue, isn't it?
Of course it is, because it's a private area. You don't normally talk about that. Ladies are quite happy to talk about mastectomies and hysterectomies or more easily, but men still don't talk about prostate troubles at all.
What first alerted you to the fact that you had a problem prostate?
It was 2007 and I was having problems with control of urinary control. So I would take ages and ages to start having a wee. And when I finished, I'd walk back to my desk in the office and I'd sit down at my desk and I'd then pass some more urine, which was starting to wet my trousers. And it was very embarrassing at work. I knew I couldn't go on like that. So I went to see my GP.
Was it a big step? I mean, did you think this could be a prostate issue? And was it a worry then going to the GP?
it was a worry that I couldn't hold my urine like I thought I ought to be able to. But the GP was completely understanding. He said straight away, there is no link between an enlarged prostate and prostate cancer. So don't start worrying about prostate cancer. We're dealing probably with an enlarged prostate, and he referred me to urology at Nottingham City Hospital.
And you had a procedure which helped?
I did. I had some tests before that to confirm that there was no bladder problem. I had a cystoscopy, which is a very, very narrow camera passed up the urethra into the bladder. That proved that there was no bladder cancer and no problem there. And then I had a TURP, a transurethral resection of the prostate.
Can I just say, and you know, it's a breakfast show. I need to be a little bit sensitive, Tim, but you mentioned the camera.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bit that the men dread, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that sends shivers down people's spines. Was that all right?
Absolutely fine. The staff are totally understanding. They know that the man doesn't want to be in that position. The camera is so fine and so tiny that you really don't feel it passing into the urethra. It has got local anaesthetic gel on it when they pass it up. So there's absolutely no discomfort. And I say the staff are so used to doing it, they're not embarrassed in any way. It's only the patient who's possibly embarrassed.
And then, unfortunately, later on, about 12 years later, you were diagnosed with prostate cancer. How has your treatment gone?
Very well indeed, because at the time of the TURP, the consultant suggested that I have PSA blood tests every 6 months after that, just to monitor whether there was any rise in my PSA. And as you say, after 12 years, it suddenly spiked. That then resulted in a diagnosis of prostate cancer. But because I'd been monitored by blood tests, they'd caught it so early that radical prostatectomy has completely cleared me of it. And my PSA is now down at undetectable levels.
So what would your message be this morning to any men watching now, or the women who love them? What would your message be about actually, you know, screw up the courage to go and get something looked at or get the PSA test? How would you put it to them?
Well, I think so many men, so many of my friends say they get up several times a night to go to the loo. That's not natural. Getting up once, maybe twice is fine. But if you're getting up more than twice a night, if you're finding difficulty starting, urinating or other problems, then, yeah, pluck up the courage to go and see your GP. It's something that it can be dealt with.
Yeah. Well, then that's the bottom line, isn't it? Tim, it's really good to see you. Thanks for being so upfront and frank about it. Thanks very much indeed. We've seen the Charles effect. We might see the Tim effect after this. You never know.
The other point is that Prostate Cancer UK have got absolutely fabulous specialist nurses. They're available on a phone number, which I can give you if you want, but the prostatecanceruk.org website.
All right, we'll put those details on our website.
Yeah.
All of the details. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much,
Absolutely
Anne.
brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
That's it. I mean, you see specialist nurses on that. I mean, brilliant, because actually they deal with it all each and every day.
And they know
so
how
you
to.
don't need to worry about it, and you don't need to be embarrassed or anything else. There you go. Well, good. I mean, it's really good to talk to him.
Made a difference, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, good on him. Good on him. Now, what about ditching your phone today?
That's harder. Maybe that's much harder than going to the GP.
I don't know. Anyway, we're going to be talking about that in just a moment.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Kearse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Do you fancy giving up your phone today? No.
I'd panic.
But anyway, it is officially No Phones at Home Day. And it's organised by psychologist Dr. Charlotte Armitage, who joins us now. Good morning to you, Charlotte. This fills me with dread. Why do it?
Well, I think you've just said it. It fills you with dread, so I think it's probably quite important to have some time away from your device. You don't have to do the whole day. You can just do an hour or half an hour or half a day, whatever feels comfortable for you. I think it's about starting with small steps that feel achievable and then working up to implementing something regularly into your schedule.
I guess we don't really realise how much time we do spend on our mobile phones and devices. I mean, I know the alarming thing is how much children seem to depend on theirs, but we adults as well. I mean, I know I've got friends who are never off, they're never without the phone in their hand.
Yeah, I think you're correct. It's very common. So the average screen time per day for adults between 16 to 64 is 6 hours and 37 minutes.
Which is worrying, but is part of the issue what we're looking at? I mean, look, as myself as an example, I look at my diary and emails and WhatsApps, but what I'm not doing is spending hours and hours going through down a YouTube hole or a TikTok hole or whatever, which I think is what a lot of young people are doing. So do we need to differentiate between the sort of two activities?
I think I think we do. true, but I think what's important is when you're using it. So really No Phones at Home Day is more focused on when we're using our devices around children and when children are using their devices as well, because we are seeing a lot more research now about the impact that devices have on child development. So it's not just mental health, but the development of key milestones such as dexterity, the pincer grip, which then consequently has an impact on our ability to hold a pen and therefore write when they start school. But it has an impact on language, communication, and we're seeing language delay in lots of young children. And then that consequently then has an impact on the development of interpersonal skills, which can impact their feelings of loneliness and isolation that weigh on into the future. So this is what we're trying to sort of point out and educate people about now.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to just try and build it in, I would have thought, into every day. Maybe you always say no phones at meals or no phones in the early evening or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We see parents putting children in front of devices at meal times all the time, don't we, if we go out for a meal now? But that's a key opportunity for a child to learn about social norms, what's expected around a table, how to manage their own feelings. So they may well feel bored, but learning to manage that feeling is really important as we move into adulthood. I mean, I do think that we're seeing a lot of mental health problems now, and I do believe that devices are one of the biggest contributing factor to that for this generation of young people.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people would agree with you, actually. Dr. Armitage, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Let's rapidly move on from that to outer space.
There's a lot going on there today.
It's a busy old time at the moment. Let's talk to planetary scientist Andy Lound, who joins us. Great to see you, Andy. Let's kick off with Axiom 3, should we? Because that docking between the Dragon capsule and the ISS is happening now.
Yeah, good morning. It's very exciting, isn't it, really, to see this? The possibility of yet another mission. This is an important one because this is a private mission of all Europeans, including a Turkish astronaut, and they'll be doing some very important scientific work over 14 days, which is really, really great, including some working on material science, but also on medicine. There's an important experiment going on where they can sort of use technology to analyse a person's cough or the way they speak to diagnose, which I think is really a brilliant experiment which is going to be carried out there. And of course, this is part of Axiom's build-up of private enterprise going into space. They'll be putting a private module on the International Space Station before it retires, and their modules then will be separated after the International Space Station ends, and they'll be building their own space station where people will be able to pay and go to a privately funded space station.
It is amazing what's happening in the world of space, isn't it, at the moment? And then, of course, yesterday and today, hopefully it'll last, the Japanese have landed on the moon.
Yes, this is a fantastic mission in many respects because this is only the fifth nation to soft land on the surface of the moon. And it looks like the soft landing worked extremely well. The SLIM spacecraft, as it's called, nicknamed the Sniper because it was able to land in a very small designated area, very, very unusual, very difficult to achieve. And it looks like it did that. Unfortunately, the solar panels aren't generating electricity. No one's too sure exactly why that is at the moment. The engineers are working on it. And what they've been able to do is they've been able to shut down unnecessary equipment, reduce the heaters. The two landers have been ejected successfully onto the surface, as far as is known, so they should be getting data back. But the worst case scenario is they'll get back as much data and scientific information as they possibly can while the batteries hold out. But you never know. They might be able to solve the problem, and then the spacecraft will operate then for about 2 weeks on the surface of the moon. But it's brilliant that the landing system has actually worked. That is a really important step because, of course, an issue of the solar panels is something they probably can solve, but the landing is the hardest part. And the fact that the software and the technology has worked for the landing bodes very well for future missions landing onto the surface of the moon.
Lovely stuff. Andy, we're out of time. We're really out of time. But in terms of the docking, it's complicated, isn't it? Because, I mean, relative to the Earth, what's the ISS moving at? Something like 26,000 miles an hour?
17,500 miles per hour, 250 miles above the surface of the Earth. And the small spacecraft has to match that perfectly so they can actually dock gently.
Oh, it's incredible stuff. Andy, really good to see you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Just love it. So exciting.
It is. It's brilliant.
Oh, dear me. And it's so... We just sort of take it for granted now that they go up and they'll dock and all be fine, but it's so...
Yeah, but yes, exactly. And as the Japanese moon mission shows, they still haven't got it completely right. There's still problems. And yet all those years ago, we landed men regularly on the moon.
We did.
For a few years.
Hopefully that will happen again before too long. That's it from us. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Pete and Ellie are here with Saturday Morning Live, straight after your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Storm Isha's on the way by the end of the weekend, but it is going to be a wet and windy weekend for many areas, particularly in the north and west. Across the south and east, you should escape much of the rain through the weekend, but it will be breezy through the afternoon. The temperatures will slowly start to pick up today across the south and east as it has been a chillier start. Elsewhere, though, the winds will strengthen. It's much milder as well, as much milder than it has been lately, and we'll see some quite heavy rain starting to fall across parts of Wales by this afternoon. Through the evening, the rain will really start to intensify as this frontal system starts to become ever closer. The temperatures are rising across parts of Scotland as well, so the snow will be melting as well as this rainfall coming down on top of it. So there's a risk of some flooding across some areas of northern Scotland. So we do have a weather warning in force through the afternoon. And then tonight we'll see that the winds really start to pick up, particularly across the south and west. It's a southwesterly breeze, so it's going to be another very mild night. Much milder than it has been lately. And then we'll start to see Storm Isha arrive through the evening on Sunday evening. You can start to see the winds twisting around. This is this area of low pressure. This is Storm Isha here, and it brings a swathe of wet weather to many northern and western areas. But again, the east should escape much of the worst of the weather. But we do have amber wind warnings in force later on Sunday. See you later.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes